All rise for the jurors. All jurors are present and accounted for, Your Honor.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. An exciting development. Would you rub your finger on the screen for a minute? Wow. The screen, just mush it. Look at that. It works. That's why we took a little longer at lunch, but that feature ought to have been available earlier. Hopefully we'll have it for the rest of the trial. We had Ms. Neely on the stand. Ms. Neely, you remain under oath. Mr. Abate, you told us you had about 10 more minutes of questions.
Let's see how good my estimation of time is, sir.
Okay.
All right, Ms. Neely, I think we left off, we were talking about how the defendant was rubbing the lady with the straw hat's back. Okay. If you saw a picture of the lady with the straw hat, do you think you would recognize her face?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked and shown to the defense counsel as State's Exhibit 257. Okay. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 257?
Yes.
And how do you recognize it?
She was the woman that was there. She was the driver.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of the driver that you saw the lady with the straw hat on?
Yes, the only difference is that that evening her hair was pulled back into a ponytail.
And this time, Your Honor, the State Attorney was the mark of State's Exhibit 257 as evidence.
Any objection? No objection. You got the wave. It's in.
And had you ever seen the lady depicted in State's Exhibit 257, the driver of the white SUV before that evening?
No.
Okay. Now, after the defendant went back into the ED or the ER, how long was he back there?
Which part of the ER? Because he was first.
After the triage.
Okay. Maybe an hour or so, maybe a little longer.
Okay. And were you a part of his treatment back in the main part of the ER?
No.
And did you remain at the lobby front desk?
Yes, I did.
And did you see him come out of the ED or the ER?
Yes, back into the lobby area. Yes.
And when you say the lobby area, I'm going to show you the screen. And you just tell me you would in the lobby that we're talking about. Or you can.
Yeah, no problem.
No, that's fine. Just make sure all the jurors can see it.
Yes.
It may need to be angled a little more.
Yeah, let me see. Now, you'll step around here, Ms. Neely. Do you see the lobby area? You can use your fingers right in front of them. You like that point or don't you?
This is the lobby room waiting area.
Okay. And where in the lobby room waiting area did you see the defendant go sit or go to? You see it on here?
Part of it was first there was another man that came later that joined them, and he was there, but when he came from the treatment, the young man was sitting here, and then over here there's some other chairs, and they were sitting. Yeah. First they were sitting here, and then
You see those other chairs
yeah.
now? Passing?
Right here.
Okay. And when you said that there was that he went to go see them, who were you talking about when you said the defendant went to go see them?
Well, initially when I was sitting at the desk, there was the lady and the other mature gentleman that I was talking about. Then there was maybe like a middle-aged guy with a whitish, blondish bob. He was sitting there because in between that time he came and said that he was looking for the man whose wife had passed. and he was sitting there, and then they all went, and well, they went to sit by where the guy with the blondish, whitish hair was, and then they moved over to those seats.
Okay. And when you said they moved over to those seats, are those the seats that were depicted in the demonstrative of the hospital waiting area that you last showed us?
Yes.
Now, did they all sit together?
Yes, those three.
Okay. When you say those three, are you talking about the defendant,
Yes.
the lady with the straw hat,
Yes.
and the other older gentleman?
Yes.
And can you describe to the jury or tell the jury how they were seated?
They were kind of huddled together. They were leaning into each other,
Okay.
and they were speaking, and they were...
So if I come next to you, they're huddled together, where would I be sitting if, let's say I was the defendant and you were the lady with the straw hat?
They were sitting, if I can, yeah. They were sitting like here, and then the mature gentleman was sitting on the end, yes, and he was leaning in, speaking.
And were they this close? Like me and you right this? Okay.
Yes. That,
And how long were they seated like this next to each other? Was it 2 seconds? Was it a couple of minutes? Was it 30 minutes?
it could have been 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay. And they just were seated, huddled together like this. And what were they doing, or what did you see them doing?
It looked like they were talking. They were explaining things, their hands, and they were leaning in, and someone would answer, and then the other would look, and it was just a very interactive type of conversation.
And so that it's clear to the jury, where are you positioned that allows you to see the three of them huddled together?
Well, I had two views. Where I was seated at the desk.
So let's see if we can rewind it. All right, you can set that down. Is this the desk you're talking about?
That is the far end of the desk.
Okay. I'm not real good with the technology.
There, this is the desk.
Okay.
And so basically you can see the chairs where I said they were sitting first, but then there's a view of those side chairs that's blocked. However, behind this wall, there were about 5 or 6 cameras that showed you different views of the blocked waiting areas. So I could look at the cameras and see.
And so when you saw them huddled together when they moved, were you looking at them on the cameras?
Yes.
Okay. And when you see them on the cameras, what happens? Do they leave? Do they stay after you saw them for about an hour, you said?
They ended up, I saw people coming in and out, but they ended up leaving. And then the other gentleman that was just sitting there, he was the last to leave.
When you say the other gentleman, are you talking about the guy with the
Yes, with the shoulder length, like here.
You said he was the last to leave?
Yes, he was the last to leave.
Okay. And where, I'm not good with the technology, can you see when we were on using the screen where the hug and the rubbing of the back occurred?
Yes.
Okay. I need to go forward or backwards?
I need it to come out just a little bit. A little further over, but right here, right in the very front.
Okay.
Like, the way that my desk is situated is right here, and they were standing here, so they were in plain view, like I could look.
Okay.
It wasn't obstructed at all.
Now, after they left, and I guess the days or the week after Ms. McIver died, did you ever speak to the lead detective, Detective Darren Smith, with the Atlanta Police Department?
No.
Okay. Did he ever come to the hospital to see you?
No.
Okay. Did he ever call you?
No.
Okay. And if you do me a favor, would you describe to the jury that evening the observations, the times that you saw the defendant throughout the night? What was his demeanor like?
He was emotionless.
Can you just kind of explain to her, what do you mean by emotionless?
He did not appear to be upset or distraught.
Objection, Your Honor. Her opinion of the demeanor. So I heard the verb appear. So I'm going to allow it, but you need to be careful as to where you go with this.
And you said he appeared to be, you said upset and distraught? Or
He did
appear to be
not.
Upset and distraught?
Did not.
Okay. Now, is the first people you came in contact with about this case members of the district attorney's office?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever speak to anyone else other than the district attorney's office about what happened that night?
No.
Okay. About your interactions with the defendant?
No.
Okay. No further questions at this time.
Okay. Mr. Singh?
Oh, I'm sorry, one last question. And when you spoke to me and other members of the district attorney's office, do you remember where you were kind enough to speak to us in the hospital?
I think it was the EMS break room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it the size of like a small closet?
That's pushing it.
Okay.
It was small.
Well, thank you.
No problem.
So, Neely, I want to understand a little bit of the chronology of that evening, if you help. My name is Don Samuel. We've never met, right?
No.
You just finished telling Mr. Bate, all the people you talked to, obviously it wasn't me, right?
Right.
You talked to Mr. Bate, you talked to Clint Rucker too, was he there?
Correct.
Other members of the DA's office were there with you when you were interviewed?
Not the initial interview. The initial interview was just Mr. Rucker, Mr. Labata, and Joanna. Those were the...
One of the investigators?
Yes.
And you gave a tape statement that time, right?
Yes.
Have you read a transcript of your statement that you gave to them?
I read through it. I received it Monday morning.
Monday morning, and today is Thursday?
Yes.
Did the transcript include the statements of two other nurses also in it?
Yes.
So the transcript was actually about 43 pages long. About 20 of it was yours, and then my math is, well, no, something like that. And another 20 or 25 pages, I'm doing some estimates here, it equals about 43, with other nurses, correct?
I'm not sure of the actual number of pages or how many pages my statement was or how many pages theirs were, but it appeared to be the end of one person's statement leading into mine.
Okay, if I just showed you, this got a lot of my notes on it, but if I showed it to you, would you recognize it? We don't need permission, right?
Mm-hmm.
You may approach.
Is this what it looked like, this format?
Yes, that's the format that I got.
And my copy has 43 pages.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
I mean, it could possibly be. I can't definitively say how many pages.
So you read this entire thing when they sent it to you, right?
I didn't read the entire one. I scanned it, and I basically looked at my testimony to make sure that it was accurate.
Okay. And it also had the statement of Ryan, correct, another nurse?
I think I did see Ryan's name.
Right. And then it also had the testimony, the statement of Sarah.
I saw Sarah's name in there.
Right. And you read all of those as well, correct?
I didn't read all of it. I only scanned through mine. They said to check it for accuracy. So that's what I
Did you tell them it
did.
was all accurate?
Yes.
Did you make any corrections to it?
No.
Okay. And this statement was given last October, if I'm correct. Is that right? October or late September of 2016, right?
No, that wasn't given late September of 2016. This statement was given actually this year. I remember because I was coming off of my honeymoon. And so I was married September 15, 2017.
I meant 17. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I meant 17, not 16.
Okay.
This is 18 now.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let me, have you talked to other nurses, by the way, before you came here this week?
This week, I have,
In the last 2 weeks.
in the last 2 weeks, we talked about the case coming up.
Okay. Who did you talk with?
We talked to my assistant UD, which is the unit director. I
Okay.
talked to, because they knew that the case was approaching, and so we were trying to figure out how our schedules would work if we were called in.
Did you talk to Nurse Sullivan?
Yes, I did talk to Terry.
Did you drive over with her today, or?
No.
She's here today, correct?
I saw her when I left out.
When did you talk with her?
I talked with her, I think it was last week and maybe over the weekend because people were trying to decide or figure out rather when we were going to be needed in court.
Were you talking about remembering what the events were back 2 years ago?
No,
Okay. Have you been watching the TV?
no, I have not.
Reading the newspaper?
No.
You know anything about what's happened in this trial until you walked in here today?
I don't know. I know that the trial has started. I do remember.
So, I don't want this witness to share with the jury what she's read in the newspaper about this case.
Okay.
You would be piercing that bubble. That would be a poor choice.
I wouldn't do that.
Okay.
Did you read in the newspaper about this case without saying what it was?
No, I haven't read the newspaper in years, honestly,
Years,
like the
okay.
physical newspaper, but
All right, so let me ask you again about get back to the beginning, which is the chronology. It is the night of the 25th, correct, of September 2016.
yes,
You're at the front desk.
yes,
The gentleman from Ethiopia, the valet, comes running in yelling, "We need help," correct? You need to say yes or no, because she needs
Yes.
to write it down. Thank you so much. And you go out along with a nurse, Blair Brown, correct?
correct,
Okay. She's here today, correct?
yes,
Okay. And out there is Mr. McIver, who you recognize, right? Correct?
correct,
And he is trying to get his wife out from the front passenger seat of the car into the wheelchair, correct?
correct,
The wheelchair was provided by the other valet who's from Eritrea. Okay, all right? Got to say yes.
yes.
You can say no, but one or the other.
Okay.
Or I don't know, or maybe, or whatever.
Yeah,
the answer is.
I'm nodding my head, waiting for him to finish to make sure that I'm answering him correctly.
Thank you for that courtesy. And you were told she was shot, correct?
Correct,
Okay, so you know it's a gunshot, right?
correct. Once we're wheeling her, because originally we didn't know.
Because the gentleman from Ethiopia, whose name I can't pronounce, didn't say it when he came into the emergency room, right?
All he said was, "We need help."
We need help, right? Okay. Into the emergency room you go, right, with the wheelchair. Mr. McIver is holding Ms. McIver's one leg, and is it Blair Brown is holding the other leg?
Correct,
And you go straight into the ER, correct?
correct,
Into one of the rooms, room number 2, correct?
correct,
Okay, and room number 2 is one of the critical care rooms, right?
yes,
Mr. McIver goes into that room because he is still holding her leg, because the wheelchair is not the best way to convey someone who is, to transport someone who is limp, correct?
Actually, he was holding her leg because she was flaccid and she was unable to prop her leg up. So that is the reason why he was holding her leg.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what I meant, but you said it
Okay.
better than I did. So he's holding one leg, Blair Brown's holding the other leg, and they go into the ER room 2, and he helps move her from the wheelchair into the bed, right?
Correct,
You were there when that happened.
Yes.
You saw that with your own eyes.
yes,
So he's in the ER bay number 2, correct?
Yes.
Is it called a bay?
it's just critical care too.
Critical care number 2. And then many other people come rushing in, because at this point, I don't know if the alarm's going out throughout, Emory Hospital, but we need help down here, right?
Correct.
Gunshot wounds are not your specialty at Emory Hospital, correct?
Correct.
And people start coming down. Dr. Sagler, am I pronouncing her name right? C-A-G-L, I'm not?
Scalar.
Huh?
Scalar.
Scalar. She is going off duty. Dr. Susan Hardy is coming on duty. So you got 2 ER doctors there, correct?
Correct.
And there also end up being some surgeons who were there, am I right?
The surgeons came later on. It was not during the initial assessment of her, and no.
My time's up, but they end up coming down into the ER room 2 also, correct?
I don't know if they actually went into ER room 2 because I was at the front, but I do know that they came rushing through.
And these are surgeons?
I suppose so, because they were on call. So
And ER doctors are not necessarily surgeons, right?
no.
Okay. Dr. Susan Hardy's not a surgeon.
No, she is not a surgeon.
Dr. Scalar?
Scalar.
Scalar is not a
Scalar.
surgeon.
Scalar.
She's not a surgeon.
No, she is not.
So Dr. Abramoff comes down, surgeon.
No, Dr. Abramoff at the time is an emergency physician.
Okay. Who are the surgeons who come down? Just tell me.
I do not know their names because they don't work in the department, but I do remember surgeons coming into the front door that were on call, and they were coming from the outside. I don't know their names.
About what time is it now?
When what happened?
Everything is going on in the ER room.
I can't tell you specifically or exactly what time. I know that between 10-ish, 10:30 when they arrived, and approximately maybe 11 or 12, I'm not sure, but it probably was an hour or so because we were just trying to stabilize her to even be able to transport her
Do you
upstairs.
think she was in the ER room for an hour?
I'm not sure. I can't definitively say exactly how long she was in the room.
If you looked at the hospital records, would that help you?
I can't necessarily, if I didn't make the notes, I can't necessarily say that I would be able to determine what time she left at that time because I was not back there. I was at the front.
Do the notes tend to be accurate? The medical records tend to be accurate at Emory Hospital?
Well, it depends. Sometimes when you chart, you can backdate your charting depending on what time you wrote or what time it actually happened, because sometimes you don't necessarily have the time to write it then, and so you can go back and chart.
And how long does Mr. McIver stay in the room after she is moved from the wheelchair to the bed?
Only a few minutes. We asked him to leave so that we could start working on her.
But he doesn't leave until after she's already on the bed and off the wheelchair, correct?
Correct.
And then he goes out because you asked him to go out, correct?
Yes, we asked him to
You
leave.
start administering fluids, correct? You attach IVs, and it's not exactly TV, but there's a lot of stuff going on, right?
Correct.
Okay. A lot of people are trying to save her life.
Yes, correct.
Nurses, technicians, doctors, eventually surgeons. Emory's doing everything they can for her, right?
Yes,
Okay. Emory is a fabulous hospital, is it not?
we are.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, I'm not going to brag about U.S. News and World Report, but like top 10 in the nation, right?
Yes.
So, her blood pressure's falling.
It didn't necessarily fall. It was low to begin with. We had to give her fluids for it even to be recognizable on the machine or on the manual cuff. That's how low it was when she initially came.
When she came in, she was not talking.
No.
I'm sure unconscious is a word that a layperson would use, but her eyes were closed, she was not talking.
No, her eyes were not always closed, and I can tell you that because I remember looking, saying, gosh, she has really nice eyes. She was very flaccid when she first came, but I'm not going to say that her eyes were closed. She just was not able to respond or was non-responsive.
When you started administering fluids, though, or the blood pressure started going up, she actually started speaking.
Yes.
And you were in the room.
Yes.
So we're talking about things you heard with your own ears, right? Mm-hmm. And you heard her say, my stomach hurts, right?
Yes.
She was in pain. She could feel pain.
Yes.
And then she expressed her belief that she was dying.
Yes.
Correct? And did you hear her say anything else? Who was communicating with her directly? Was one doctor saying something to her?
Dr. Abermaw.
Okay. How about Dr. Hardy?
Dr. Hardy also.
Okay. They were actually talking with her.
Yes.
But I understand that you actually didn't hear the words communicated back and forth other than what you just said, my stomach's hurting and am I dying? Correct?
Exactly.
But Dr. Hardy was right next to her. She was at the head, correct? The head of the bed is what I meant to say.
She was moving all around. I cannot pinpoint exactly where she was, but she was in the room.
I know your memory is not perfect, whether it was 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour, but the decision was made to get her from the ER to the OR, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Which means from the emergency room to the operating room.
Correct.
You can't do an operation in the ER, right? You came close tonight, actually, right? That night. But generally, you do operations in an operating room, right?
Well, there are procedures that can be done in the emergency room. It really depends on the severity or the condition of the person at that time. I wasn't in the room at that particular time, so I don't know what was done, but if it's severe enough or if they feel that a life-saving measure could be accomplished or done at that particular time, they will start a procedure there.
And they did do some procedures there. You're aware of that?
I heard. I did not witness it myself.
Can't have you recite hearsay here. And then eventually she goes upstairs. She's brought upstairs to the operating room, correct?
That is what I was told.
Give us a rough idea of what time you think it is now.
See, that I don't know because I was in the front.
Stop.
That's a speculation.
Okay.
Who said she went to the operating room? Okay.
You can ask one more time, but we were starting to hear that wasn't her bailiwick, not keeping track of the time.
I thought the objection was the hearsay that she went at all.
No, he said speculation.
Or that she went to the...
Yeah.
When she goes up to the operating room, who then are you seeing that you described a little while ago? Did you see the lawyer who came to the hospital?
I was sitting at the desk. At that particular time, again, I don't know exactly what time she went up to the operating room, so I don't know if the time in which she came to the door, she was actually in the operating room or whether she was still in the emergency room. But I did see a mature male, the mature male that I spoke of that came to the door.
And mature, you're not describing his behavior, but he was older.
Older, I'm trying to be politically correct here. You don't want to say the old guy.
You can say it. It's not going to hurt my feelings. He's older than me. And he asked, what did he ask?
He said, how do I get to the third floor?
Okay. Why would you go to the third floor?
Only for, at this particular time, it had to be for an emergency surgery because our that operating room isn't open at that time.
So when he arrives, it's safe to assume he wanted to go to the third floor because she was up there already, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you know where Mr. McIver was at that point when the mature lawyer arrived?
No, I don't know where he was.
Do you know where Danny Jo Carter was? That's the woman.
No, I don't know where she was at that time.
So then you started describing seeing the group of them or individually at different times? I just want to get, I know you can't say 1:47 in 30 seconds, but when are you starting to see people again?
This was after she was deceased and after, yeah.
So you don't see the lawyer, Danny Joe Carter, or Tex McIver again until you hear that she died up in the operating room, correct?
I saw them throughout the night, in passing, but are you speaking, I'm trying to get a better understanding of what you're asking so that I can be as accurate as possible, because I'm not.
I know that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a better understanding from you. So
Okay.
you got to tell me, when was it that you started seeing them again?
Okay. Well, let's see. The gentleman came to the door, asked me how to get to the third floor. I don't know how long they were up there, but when I came back to the desk a little while longer, I think that I just come back from lunch or either the restroom or something, but I came back to sit at the front. And then at that particular time, that's when the lady and the mature gentleman was standing in front of the desk, standing up in the lobby. That's when I started to see them again. I don't know the time though, but this was the time when he was being triaged.
And where was Mr. McIver then?
He was in the triage room.
Okay. When is the next time that you see them all, kind of your testimony ended with in the waiting room there, and I'm pointing to the big screen there. Mm-hmm. Was that many hours later or 30 minutes later?
No, it wasn't many hours later. From the time that he was triaged to...
Let me stop you there. When you say he, the pronoun he, who are you referring to?
From the time... Mr. McIver was the only person being triaged. So from the time that Mr. McIver was triaged to the time that he went to the back and the time that he was released, it was not a very long time. It might have been, I don't know, 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay. But I want to put that in context of when they come down from the operating room. They come down from the operating room at some point, correct? Mm-hmm. Early morning, right? 1, 2 in the morning, something like that.
Yeah.
And then later, she's deceased at this point, right?
Yes.
Later, Mr. McIver is admitted to the hospital, correct? Through the ER.
He's not admitted to the hospital. He was
admitted
triaged and taken to a room. That's different from an admission.
You're right. But he then becomes a patient, right?
He is a patient in the ER at that time.
And approximately what time is that?
I'm going to object to this point. It's been asked and answered.
Well, no, I think he's trying to triangulate, and I'm going to let him continue to triangulate as long as he thinks that's fruitful and it's not repeating something that we've worked through. So keep going.
You can ask me.
Okay.
Even if you don't give us an exact time, how much time was there between when they come down from the OR and he becomes a patient?
Well, see, that I don't know, because when I came back from lunch or from the restroom, I can't remember which one, he was already in the triage room, so I honestly don't know how long he had been there before I arrived. So, I don't know, maybe it was maybe 1 a.m., maybe 12 a.m., somewhere around there.
When he is triaged?
That's what I'm thinking, around 1-ish, 2-ish, somewhere around there.
If you look at the medical records, would that help you at all, or you just think they're wildly inaccurate?
No, I don't think they're wildly inaccurate. Not at all. Because here's the thing, when someone is triaged, they're triaged immediately. So those timestamps tend to be more accurate than a nurse working on the floor dealing with multiple patients. So those triage times tend to be accurate because you save it and you continue, versus a nurse that's going between different patients, and she may not have time to chart between each individual patient and chooses to do it at another time.
I'm going to show you some documents. I don't want you to read them out loud. I don't want you to show them to anybody. I just want you to tell me if they refresh your recollection as to what time he ends up becoming a patient later that night, okay?
Can you inquire as to the page?
Page stamp 24211. You just read this yourself for a minute, see if you can figure it out. It doesn't refresh your recollection? Just say it doesn't help.
Which one am I supposed to be reading?
Well, right. is the beginning. May I talk to her? I'll direct her back.
That's not something that we do. This is a physician.
So, when you're talking, the court reporter needs to be able to hear you, so, but don't be reading out loud what's in front of you.
This is not something that we do. This is not something that the nurses do.
I'm just asking you
Okay.
to refresh your recollection as to what time he becomes a patient, what time he's triaged and becomes a patient, whether you wrote it or not. Doesn't help you.
No. No, again, and that's not who triages.
Is Danny Jo Carter there the entire time, as far as you know?
Yes, I didn't see her the entire time, but I believe that she was.
Your memory is that she's there from 10 o'clock at night, or 10:15 or 10:30, whatever time the vehicle arrives, until everybody leaves at, what, 6, 7 in the morning?
From my recollection, I can say to the end, I don't know the time though that she left.
Never did she leave for many hours, though, in your memory.
I didn't see her for some hours, but I don't know whether or not she left. I saw her when she originally came. I saw her in the hallways. I saw her while he was being triaged, once he was released, and during the conversation in the lobby area.
And meanwhile, a fourth person arrived, correct, who had longer hair?
Yes, but he arrived prior to Mr. McIver being released.
While he was still being treated in the ER.
Right.
Does Nurse Sullivan have a hearing problem?
She stated that she does, and sometimes when we're working and you speak to her, she doesn't hear you and you have to repeat it. And she'll say, no, say it to this ear because I can't.
She can't hear with her left ear, right? That's your impression.
I believe that, let's see, when I'm trying to imagine when I'm facing her, what side she does it to. Okay. No, she'll turn this ear to you, and she said, so I think it's her right ear, but she uses her left ear mostly. That's what I believe. I could be wrong, but it's one of her ears that she has a hearing deficit in.
Any redirect?
Just a few questions there. But Ms. Neely, to your knowledge, recollection, can she hear clearly from the other ear?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Samuel talked about Emory being a top 10 hospital, or top 10 something. Is it a top 10 level 1 trauma center?
No, we are not a trauma center.
What is it top 10 in?
Medical procedures. We're known for cancer treatments. We're known for dealing with medical conditions. We aren't known to be a trauma center. Often trauma centers it's a designation, the level. It's a designation, and the designation is given based on the resources that you have to treat trauma patients.
And what is Emory designated as?
I'm uncertain, but I think that we are a level 3. I think that we are level 3.
Now, what is a level 1 trauma center?
What is it, or
What resources do it, if you know, does a level 1 trauma center have that a level 3 trauma center doesn't have?
I mean, they are fully equipped to deal with traumatic injuries. Normally they have surgeons on site, on staff 24 hours a day. Level 1 trauma centers, they basically can do anything that an emergency department can do, but they also have trauma surgeons 24 hours a day, ready, willing, able to go, and they're able to do the full gamut.
And what are the level 1 trauma centers here in Atlanta?
There are 2 that I know of, and that is Grady Hospital and also Atlanta Medical Center.
Okay. And is a gunshot wound an injury that you were talking about that they would treat?
Trauma centers?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Now, you talked about dating Joe and the lady with the straw hat and the mature gentleman, the one who's older than Mr. Samuel. You said you saw them talking?
Yes, I did.
Was it just the 2 of them?
It was just the 2 of them when he was being treated and triaged.
And do you know if they were talking about what happened in the SUV?
That I don't know. I don't know.
Did you hear anything that they said?
No.
Okay. And the lawyer, mature gentleman, was he the first person who came to the hospital to see the defendant?
Yes.
And since Mr. Samuel brought up that he's a lawyer, do you know what kind of law he practices?
Who?
The mature gentleman.
I don't. I don't.
I don't think I have any further.
Okay. Any questions from the jurors for Ms. Neely? You will send them to your left. I'll get them from Deputy Burton. Ms. Neely, there was mention of Mr. McIver being triaged or being treated. Do you have any direct knowledge as to why he went into a triage area?
I don't have direct knowledge in which he told me specifically. I was just...
Did you play any role in checking him out or saying you need to go over here or anything like that?
No. When I came back to the desk, he was already checked in and there.
Okay. Did you go with the person with the straw hat to the valet parking lot?
I did. I walked her out to the valet parking lot and I told the valet that she needs to get her phone out of the car.
Okay. Did you go all the way to the car or you just got her to the valet person?
I got her to the valet person.
Okay. Did the police ever show up to the ER that evening / morning?
Yes.
Did they show up because you called them?
No.
Is it common for...
I didn't, but I believe the charge nurses, I'm not sure, but someone had to
My
call.
question was just, did you call?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No.
All right. Is it common for treatment to begin, meaning nurses show up and get out into the valet area as was shown on the video?
It is if there's a patient that is unable to walk themselves in, we will go out into the valet area.
Okay. You described an individual as having shoulder-length hair. Mm-hmm. Is that someone different from the person who you have respectfully called the mature gentleman?
Yes, that is someone different.
2 different people?
These are 2 different people.
Okay. Any follow-up based on that, Mr. Abate?
Just a few questions. Ms. Neely, when the police arrived, did they ever speak to you?
No.
And is there, other than the valet area for patients to enter, is there another means or way where patients can come through in the ED or the ER area?
Yes, patients can come through by the ambulance ramp if they're brought in by the ambulance, or sometimes patients or people wander. You can, but you have to have access to it. But there's more than one entrance into the emergency department.
So if you call 911 and an ambulance picks you up, you have access. Would you have access that way?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Samuel, any follow-up? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your time. Mm-hmm. You are free to go.
Thank you.
Well, Oh, sure. Ms. Neely, just make sure as you're out there, if you choose to stick around, that you're free to do. You're not. Okay. Just don't chat with any colleagues on your way out. Okay. Next witness.
They will call Ms. Blair Brown.
Could the council approach for 1 second?
Yes.
You ready to
We're ready. Thank you.
raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you should give in court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, ma'am. If you will, have a seat. Get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state your name and spelling.
Sure, my name is Blair Brown, B-L-A-I-R-B-R-O-W-N.
Good afternoon, Ms. Brown.
Hi.
Can you tell the jury how you're employed?
Sure. Currently I'm employed at Emory Healthcare. As of a week ago, I was an emergency room nurse at Emory main campus, but I transferred last week to Emory Midtown.
And Ms. Brown, you're real soft-spoken.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You can just try to talk to the mic a little bit.
Okay.
Keep your voice up so the court reporter can take everything down. Okay?
Sure.
Now, you just moved to the Emory Midtown location.
Emory Midtown
How
location.
long did you work at Emory, the main hospital location?
Sure. I started in August of 2005, so over 2.5 years.
In 2005, you said?
2015, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a lawyer, my math isn't great. But
Yeah.
So, where do you live in the city of Atlanta? Or do you live in the city of Atlanta?
I do. I live in Midtown.
Okay. And how close is where you, or the general area of Midtown, where do you live?
To what? How close am I to what?
The street, like what's, your home?
Yes.
What street is it close to?
I'm on Peachtree Street.
Okay. And how close is where you live on Peachtree Street to your new location, Emory Midtown?
5 blocks.
Okay. And are you familiar with Piedmont Park?
Of course.
Okay.
Mhm.
And how close is Piedmont Park around Piedmont and 12th and 14th Street to your new location, Emory Midtown?
Maybe a total of 10 blocks walking side to side. I mean, it's a 10-minute walk. It's a 2-minute drive.
And are you familiar, you live on Peachtree, are you familiar with 12th and Peachtree?
Of course. Mhm.
Okay. And how close is 12th and Peachtree to Emory Midtown?
Well, if I said it was 10 blocks walking, then I would just add 5 more onto that and get to about 15 blocks, maybe.
Okay. Now, you said you worked at the main campus on Clifton Road for 2.5 years. Did you work the entire time in the ER?
I did.
Okay. And why don't you tell the jury, before we get into all your job responsibilities and duties, your educational background?
Sure. So I've been a working nurse since 2012, but went to the University of Oklahoma to get my nursing degree in 2015 before I started working at Emory. So I was a licensed registered nurse before that, or licensed practical nurse before that, and then became a registered nurse after my education at the University of Oklahoma.
And at the University of Oklahoma, what was some of your training? What was your training like?
Sure. So actually the choice I made to go to Oklahoma was based on their school there has their own hospital, just like Emory has a hospital. That's a level 1 trauma center. My interest was trauma at the time, so I went there to be trauma specifically trained.
Okay. And if you were tell the jury a little bit about the capabilities of a level 1 trauma center.
Sure. So level 1 trauma centers take care of everything. It's not just trauma specific. Whatever walks through the door, they take care of, from your cough to pneumonia to the worst trauma you can think of. Unlike Emory, we have trauma centers have trauma surgeons on call 24/7. And typically they have more operating rooms because trauma uses typically more surgery is needed with trauma patients.
And you said, unlike Emory, the surgeons, how is the surgeon contacted for a trauma, I guess, at Emory?
So when you have a trauma come into a non-trauma center, you're just going to have to page surgery, especially like when especially on a weekend, if that were to happen, because surgeries don't take place on weekends. Surgeons don't work weekends unless they're called in, typically. So we have to page the surgical area of the hospital, let them know, please open up a unit. Then we have to, find a surgeon in the hospital or that will come in that could do surgery on the area of the body that's affected by the trauma.
And this may sound like a dumb question, but I'm not in the medical field. When you say on-call trauma surgeon or surgeon, are they actually on the physical premises?
Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not.
Okay. Are they typically nearby?
Yes, I don't know what the doctors, what they sign and say they're willing to do, but when you're on call, you usually have to be able to be there within 30 minutes.
Now, back on September 25th of 2016, where in the ER were you working?
So you have your typical emergency rooms where you take care of patients that come in with all different illnesses. But at Emory University Hospital, there are 2 rooms that we call our critical rooms. And that is a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning there's 1 nurse to take care of these 2 rooms because they typically require a lot more hands-on attention. So I had the critical rooms that night.
And you said the 2-to-1 ratio, so did you have just 2 rooms?
That's correct.
And I'm going to direct your attention to the screen in front of you. It states Exhibit 252. Is that an example, or is that a critical room at your Emory facility at the time you were working there?
It is.
Now, can you tell the jury what the difference between, let's say, a critical room at Emory and a critical room was at a Trauma 1 facility?
Sure. So at a Trauma 1 facility, you usually have more equipment in the room. The equipments tend to be larger. The room tends to be larger, and the equipment seems to be more vast. For instance, there's a thing that we use to infuse blood rapidly when someone's losing a lot of blood. We don't have that in our critical room. We keep it in a closet to pull into the room because that's typically something with trauma.
And why is it kept in a closet?
Because we use it so infrequently.
Now, on that evening, or on September 25th, what was your shift hours, or when were you working?
So I was night shift at that point, so I was 7 p to 7 a.
Okay. And did you become aware that evening that somebody was in the valet area that needed assistance?
Yeah, in the emergency room we carry walkie-talkies. And like I said, I had the critical rooms and I did not have a critical patient at the time. So over the walkie-talkie I heard, I need assistance in valet. And I recognized the voice as Allison, who I knew was up front, who was another nurse. And I said, I don't have a patient, I need to go up there and help her. So I swiftly went to the front to valet.
And you said you didn't have any patients. Was the ER or busy at that time?
At that time, I don't remember it being very busy. It did not stick out to me, no.
You said you immediately went to the valet area. Had you heard over the walkie-talkie, with your walkie-talkie, that a gunshot wound victim was in the valet area, would you have taken more people with you? Would you have brought different things?
Of course, so we all carry the walkie-talkie, so if someone had paged that there's a gunshot wound victim in the valet, I believe that multiple people, almost certain a doctor would have gone out front too.
And in this instance with Ms. McIver, did anyone other than you and Ms. Neely respond immediately to the SUV?
Immediately, no.
And when you got to the valet area and saw the SUV, who did you see?
So the SUV was in front of me with the front door open. I saw one of our valet workers, Allison, and the gentleman sitting over there outside.
And when you say the gentleman sitting over there, can you describe who you are identifying by an article of clothing?
Sure. He's wearing, I think, a dark gray suit, light hair.
And is he sitting to the far left?
Okay.
There's a
Defense
couple-
is stipulating that the witnesses identify the defendant.
And I apologize, there's a couple of people with light hair over there, so I want to make sure everybody was sure. I was just trying to be respectful.
For sure. No.
You don't have it.
Suspect here.
Was there anybody in the driver's seat?
I saw a woman getting out of the driver's seat.
And do you remember, can you describe the woman that was getting out of the driver's seat? Did you see her?
I did see her. I can't remember all the specifics. I just remember light colored hair and some Western wear flair to her clothing.
Okay. Sounds like it's not your style.
Not my thing. Not my thing.
So, when you rushed to the front of the hospital, the valet area, what was the first thing that you and Miss Neely did?
So they were already trying to get her out of the car. So I was helping move her into the wheelchair. Again, at that time, I had no idea why she was there. There was no apparent trauma that I could see. I heard some light moaning, and she was very limp in her body. It was difficult to get the wheelchair moving because her legs were dangling off. So I grabbed a leg, and the other leg was not being pulled up at all. So I looked at the gentleman over here and I said, "Can you lift up her leg?" And he started to. I asked, "What is going on?" And that's when he said, "Gunshot wound" to me.
So, let me just backtrack. You had to tell the defendant to actually lift her leg?
Correct.
Okay. So he was doing that in your direction.
Correct.
And then you said, "What's happening? What's going on?"
Yeah. I said, "What's going on?"
And he said to you what?
Gunshot wound.
Did he say anything else to you other than gunshot wound?
No.
Okay. So, as you lift her one leg and you tell the defendant to lift another, what do you do?
So Alice is behind, pushing the wheelchair in. We're going through double doors. I reach down with my other hand and press my walkie-talkie, and I say, "GSW, Nicole, who was charge nurse that night, we're coming to room 2, which is one of the critical rooms." By her condition and what was going on, she blows by triage. When they're critical, they go to the critical care room and they're triaged there. They don't wait in a waiting room or anything like that.
And when you get to the critical room 2, what's the first thing that you do?
So immediately you start removing her clothes, attaching her to monitors, removing her personal items, trying to get vital signs, that kind of thing.
And is she still limp? Is she still unconscious?
She was moaning. I was hearing small moans here and there, but she was not talking in any kind of full sentences at that time.
Okay. At that point, had any physicians come into the room?
Yeah, when we were moving her from the wheelchair onto the gurney, Dr. Hardy had come into the room.
Okay. And is Dr. Hardy talking to Ms. McIver?
Right at that point, I don't believe she was talking. I think she was talking to the staff, the nurses, saying, "What's going on? Get me this equipment, get me that."
Okay. And I'll back up just for a second because I'm technology, I'm not very good at it. So if you look at the screen that's in front of you, what are we looking at right here?
We're looking at 2 sets of sliding glass doors that come into the emergency room from valet.
And would these be the same doors that you ran out to the SUV and then came back in?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm gonna play this for the jury, and will you tell the jury when you see yourself on the screen?
Sure.
And do you know who the person in the yellow shirt is?
No.
Okay. Do you know who that person in the yellow shirt is?
I don't know him by name, but I recognize his face. He's one of our ballet workers.
And who is that walking outside of the door?
So that was Allison Neely, who was sitting at the front desk that night, followed by me.
And when you're walking out, would that have been after you heard over the walkie-talkie that there was help needed in the, or assistance was needed in the valet area?
Correct.
And what we're seeing now is this what you were describing earlier with Ms. McIver, flaccid, and you and the defendant having to each hold a leg and take her into critical room 2.
Correct.
So we were at where the physicians, Dr. Harden, did come in. You guys are attempting to give her medical care. What's the next thing that you do after you're checking vitals and trying to get fluids?
So at that time, I was, like I said, part of a trauma of any kind, and it wasn't evident, was finding the wound, locating where she had been hit by a bullet. So you're taking off all her personal items, you're taking off her clothes. I was taking off her a ring on her left hand, as well as earrings.
Okay. And what did you do with that jewelry?
Sure. We have small little red bags that we send labs in. I put them in the bag so they wouldn't be separated from each other, and I walked out of room 2 to give it to her husband.
Okay. And as you walk out of critical room 2 and you meet with her husband, do you have a conversation?
I did. At that point, we still hadn't located the gunshot wound. It wasn't evident, like I said. And so I started questioning him. I leaned in kind of a comforting manner and said, "What happened? What's going on?" And he said to me, "It was an accident. I had the gun in the back seat, and it just went off, and it was an accident."
So let's break that down. So you ask him what's going on. Mm-hmm. And does he answer you immediately?
No, it's a delayed response.
Okay. And when he finally responds, what's the first thing he says?
He says it was an accident.
All right. And then after he says it was an accident, what's the next thing?
He said the gun was in my hand.
And after he says the gun was in my hand, what's the next thing that he says?
It just went off.
Did he tell you that he pulled the trigger?
He did not use that exact terminology, no.
And after he said the gun went off, did you ask him any more questions?
I did. I was a bit perplexed by that, realizing that he had just told me he had shot my patient. And I said, "Well, what kind of gun did you use?" He was delayed in response, didn't say much, just kind of staring at me. And I started naming guns. I said, yeah.
What kind of guns did you name or ask him about?
Yeah, I said, was it a 22? Was it a 38? Was it a shotgun? And he just responded back to me, 38.
And are you familiar with guns?
I'm not an expert, but I know a little bit about guns.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you know a little bit about guns?
I grew up in the South.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. Well, also being part of your trauma training, you learn that different kind of guns have different sized bullets. There's exploding bullets, there's non-exploding bullets.
And is that why or was that part of the reason you were asking the defendant about what type of guns you could determine what kind of bullet
Yeah.
to hit the patient?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I wanted to be able to go back in the room and give an update to the doctor.
And when he was telling you in that conversation that it was an accident, that the gun was in my hand and it just went off, did he tell you that the car hit a bump?
I don't recall.
Did he mention anything about homeless people or Black Lives Matter protest?
No, not that I remember.
And when you're having this conversation with Mr. McIver, the defendant, how close are you?
So when I originally came out of the room, I'm looking at a man who's obviously, seen his wife shot, injured. So I'm kind of in that, nurse consoling mode. So I am one hand on the shoulder, leaning in very close to his face, like Tokyo train close.
Okay.
To somebody.
There's a lot of us who haven't been to Tokyo and ridden on a train there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna approach you and you let me know when to stop.
Yeah.
No, we're not real close. Are we this close?
I'm about this close.
Okay. And how long do you think you can have a conversation with him like this?
Maybe 10, 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Why are you, I know you say you're in consoling mode, why are you that close? Are there reasons for that?
I wanted him to feel like I was concerned about him, concerned about his wife, involved in the matter, and also, you have to be quiet. You have to quietly talk to someone. There's HIPAA violations. If someone were to overhear medical information, that would be wrong.
And when you're this close to him, is there anything that you remember about his appearance or anything that sticks out in your mind as you're having this conversation with him?
Sure. So he was red-faced,
Okay.
and I didn't know if that was a sunburn or just his complexion or what. And I did smell alcohol.
Okay. And you said that conversation lasted about 20 to 30 seconds?
Approximately, yeah.
Okay. And after you have that conversation with him, does he say anything else about what happened in that vehicle?
No.
Okay. Do you, after that, do you go back into the critical room?
I do.
Okay. And why do you go back in critical room 2?
Why did I go back in? To keep working on the patient,
Okay.
trying to save her life.
And when you went back in there, I guess what was your role or what were you doing?
Sure. So I had the computer open. I was starting to try to make what we call a triage note, where we write in some basic information, but I realized quickly she was declining and I couldn't finish that at that moment. So I started doing things like attaching her to more equipment, helping to radio to our charge nurse what we would need so she could bring it to us. I had gotten some fluids out and primed tubing to get that going. I did a bunch of stuff.
We don't have to go through all of it.
Okay.
Now, at this point, you have wheeled her in and she's being worked on. If you could estimate, I know it's not going to be exact, it's been some time, how long at that point do you think she had been in critical room 2? How much time had passed from when you wheeled her in from the valet area to her being treated at that point, her continuing treatment at that point in critical room 2?
After I had spoke with this gentleman and come back in, maybe a few minutes, 3 minutes tops.
Okay. And since you brought speaking with the defendant again, how did you know that what you were smelling when you were that close to him was alcohol?
Well, I'm 30 years old, so for 9 years,
The world, your age.
so for 9 years, I enjoy a little wine here and there, so I know that smell. I also smelt it on patients before.
And when you say you know that smell, were you sure it was wine?
No, I could smell ethanol.
Okay. Now, at some point, is the decision made to move her to the OR?
Yes.
And before that decision is made, are you part of a conversation about having her transported to Grady?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jury a little bit about that conversation and why it was being had.
Sure. So as soon as we got her in, Dr. Hardy, and some other nurses were saying, are we keeping her or are we sending her to Grady? Anytime a trauma comes in, we have to figure out if they're too critical to go to Grady, or if they're stable enough to be put in an ambulance and taken to Grady and be treated by trauma physicians.
Okay. And ultimately, was Ms. McIver transported to Grady?
No, she was not.
Okay. And is that because at that time she was too critical?
Correct.
Okay. Did any other physicians other than Dr. Hardy come into critical room 2 and continue to try to treat her?
Yes.
And do you remember those physicians' names?
So another emergency room physician, Claire Abramoff, was there. She had come in and helped. And then once, I think we had a cardiothoracic surgeon. It was his specialty. He was the one on call, got called in, and he came into the room. I don't recall his name.
Okay. And when the cardiothoracic surgeon came in, do you at that point, do you know how much time had passed since her initial arrival into the Emory ER?
Maybe 20 minutes.
Now, this sounds like a dumb question, so I apologize, but an emergency room physician, do they have any training in surgery, or is that different?
It's completely different. It's a different residency program. It's, yeah.
Okay. So can an emergency room physician perform, I guess, emergency surgery?
I don't know. I think you'd have to ask them what
Okay.
they're able to do and not able to do.
I'll ask a better question. That night on September 25th of 2016, did any emergency room physicians perform surgery on Mrs. McIver?
No, just the cardiothoracic surgeon.
And when the cardiothoracic surgeon came in, what was the first thing he or she did?
So he assessed the patient, looked at her, started listening to her lungs, her belly, was using an ultrasound to look in her belly and her chest, and immediately looked at me and said, I'm going to crack her chest, get the chest tray.
Okay. And prior to that conversation, when you first encountered Ms. McIver in the vehicle, and then helping cut off her clothes and continuing the treatment before the surgeon came in, is there a lot of blood being actually lost outside of her body?
No, most of the blood was internal bleeding.
Okay. Explain to the jury why that is.
Sure. So she was hit in a very vascular organ area, and so when she has a tiny small bullet hole. So there's blood is filling up inside of her cavity. It's not like when you have a leg blown off and you have all that area for blood to escape from. Your blood is just filling up in your abdomen, your back, all those places.
Okay. And so the cardiothoracic surgeon said he's going to have to crack her chest. What does that mean?
That means we're going to do a thoracotomy.
Okay. And was one done?
Yes.
And was it done in critical room 2 or in a different room?
In critical room 2.
Okay. And are you assisting with this?
I am.
And how are you assisting the surgeon?
So I'm getting out the chest tray, which includes all the materials we'll need to open her up.
Okay. And what is a thoracotomy?
Sure. It's a large incision made right underneath your rib cage. What they do is they cut your rib cage open wide, spread your rib cage out with their hand, then go in and have a good look at your aorta and your heart.
Okay. And after that's done, are you still assisting the surgeon?
I am. I'm handing him clamps to clamp her aorta.
Okay. And after the clamps are being put in her heart or in her aorta, are they able to transfer her?
No.
Okay. Are they able to transfer to the surgery floor?
Yes. After that is done, he immediately says, we're going to surgery now.
Okay. And who takes Ms. McIver out to surgery?
I do, as well as 2 other nurses.
Okay. And where is the surgery floor, surgery center in the Emory Main Hospital?
Sure. So the emergency room is on floor 1, and the surgical suites are on floor 3.
Okay. And once you get her onto the 3rd floor, what do you do next?
We run with the gurney with her on it. I had started pumping her chest because she was hooked up to a monitor. I noticed that she was not in a rhythm. Her heart was not in a rhythm at all. And so I started pumping her chest, and we ran with her to the operative suite, took her off the gurney and put her on the operating table.
And before you're running with her on the gurney, pumping her chest, back in critical room 2, is Ms. McIver trying to speak to you? Is she able to speak to you?
When I entered the room after I had spoken to her husband, she was starting to ask questions. She asked me if she was going to die. And yeah.
And was that all the questions that she asked you?
Yeah, she just asked me. She looked at me and said, "Am I going to die?"
And when she said that, did you say anything to her?
I said, "No, we're gonna help you."
Okay. Now, while she's in that room, is anybody else trying to speak to her?
Yes, Dr. Hardy is speaking to her.
Okay. And is Ms. McIver responding?
She did respond, yes.
And without telling me what Dr. Hardy said, what did you hear Ms. McIver say?
I just heard it was an accident.
And when you heard her say that, was that after you spoke to the defendant right outside of critical room 2?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is that all that you heard her say, or did you hear her say anything else after that?
I believe at one point I heard her say, "It's hurting," and that's it.
And after you get her into the operating room, do you transfer to a different bed, or the procedure performed on the gurney that you transferred on?
Yeah, we take her off the gurney and put her on the operating room table.
And do you stay for the surgery, or do you leave?
I stay to hook her up to the machines in the operating room. They're checking her vitals, looking at her heart rhythm, and then I leave.
And after you leave, where do you go?
We go back down to the emergency room and make sure that we put in all our charting fresh and start cleaning up.
And did you interact with the defendant again?
No.
Okay. And was your only interaction with the defendant when you had that real close conversation with him?
That and at ballet.
And at the second encounter, the one where you're talking about the jewelry and how it was an accident, how the gun went off, did he ever ask you to see his wife?
No.
Did you ever ask the defendant did you ever see the defendant in critical room 2?
No.
Okay. And during the procedures that were happening in critical room 2, does the defendant stay in that area right in front of it? Does he leave, or do you know?
To my best knowledge, I did not see him outside of room 2. I had gone in and out a couple more times just to grab some blood and talk to the charge nurse, and I did not see him outside the room.
And when you say you did not see him outside the room, is this after the second conversation you had with him?
Yes.
Okay. And do you see the driver or the other lady in the area during the treatment?
No, I only saw her at ballet.
Okay, that was the only time that you saw her. Okay. After you come down from the third floor, the surgery floor, what do you do next, or do you have anything else to do with the treatment for Ms. McIver?
No, at that point it's just about charting everything we've done and cleaning up.
Now, when you say charting, can you explain to the jury what you mean by charting?
Sure. So when anybody has medical attention brought to them, a nurse's responsibility is to chart what they've done to them in a time-sensitive manner.
Okay. And when you say time-sensitive, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So when we chart, we timestamp those charts. Especially in a trauma, real time is important to know how long it took from getting the patient on the bed until we have an IV in her, until we start CPR or cut open her chest or whatever we're doing.
And when you're charting, do you put the time the procedure happened? What kind of detail are you putting in the chart?
Yeah, so when you enter a note for the chart, it has a time at the top, and you can manipulate it to be the specific time you believe it was.
And when you say you manipulated or to the time that you believe it was, how are you making that estimation?
So I believe I had started the first note, and I remember that exact time that I'd started the first note, and from there, we also have something in our critical room too that we take vital signs on, and when you press a certain button on it, you can go back in time and see what time each vital sign was taken. So I glanced at that, saw the approximate times that I was taking vital signs, and coordinated those with the procedures we were doing.
And you said you remember the initial note, or the time that the initial note was put in. Do you remember that time today?
I don't.
Okay. Now, after the charting, you're doing the charting, do you learn, or do you find out that Ms. McIver dies?
I did, yeah, so maybe an hour after that, I saw the cardiothoracic surgeon walking through the department, and I asked him what had happened, and he said she didn't make it.
And do you remember about what time that was?
I don't know the time.
Okay. I don't believe I have any other questions pending. Redirect.
Thank you. My name is Don Samuel. We met just last week, right?
That's correct.
You were kind enough to let me come speak with you with Richard Hyde over here. I don't know if you can't see him now,
Yeah.
but the other mature guy over there. So the valet comes out and says, we need help out here, correct? He comes in and says, we need help. And you go out with Nurse Neely and help the patient come out of the front passenger seat, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. McIver is there, correct?
Correct.
He's wearing a red shirt, am I right?
Correct.
And he helps, correct?
He's holding open the door, and he picks up her leg after I ask him to.
Okay. And then you head into the ER, skip triage, straight into the critical care room number 2.
Correct.
Does Mr. McIver go into the room and help move her from the wheelchair onto the bed?
I don't recall.
Okay. Was Nurse Neely in there during that time?
Yes.
Okay. So she's in there, you're in there, you don't recall if Mr. McIver helped?
I don't recall.
This was a year and a half ago.
Correct.
All right. And immediately all the people at Emory, all the medical professionals at Emory, not all, but everyone who's there is doing everything they can to try to help her, correct?
Yes.
As much as can be done in the ER, right?
Yes.
And eventually up in the OR on the 3rd floor.
Yes.
And you and I looked at the medical records the other day, correct? Mm-hmm. Were you able to come up with a kind of a timeline of the events that happened, just roughly? I'm not asking you to be precise to the minute or the second. Approximately what time did they arrive, according to the medical records that we reviewed?
I think it was around 10:15, something like that.
And would you want to look at them again? If they're in front of you, would it help, or?
Sure.
Okay. And to be fair, you did this with me the other day also, correct?
Yes.
Right. You're doing some of the charting, correct?
Yes.
You're making the entries on these medical records, correct?
Yes.
So approximately what time, according to the information that you had and records that you were reviewing in your own memory, does the car arrive and she's admitted into the ER?
The time that stands out to me is around 10:15.
Okay.
But I can't be certain of that.
That's fine. And then what time does she end up in the operating room on the 3rd floor?
Approximately 35 minutes later.
Okay. So, again, give or take a few minutes. Between the time she comes into the ER, which is, if she arrives at 10:15, maybe 10:20-ish or something, she's basically upstairs in the OR somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 o'clock. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And during that 35, 40-minute period, whatever it is, you're in the room with her and Dr. Susan Hardy, correct?
Correct.
And Dr. Abramoff, correct?
Correct.
The thoracic surgeon, correct?
Correct.
This is all happening downstairs in the ER, right?
Correct.
All right. And it is not necessarily in chronological order, but it is there that you hear Diane McIver regain coherence.
Yeah, she became conscious.
She became conscious. You're giving her fluids and trying to get the blood pressure stabilized, correct?
Yeah, fluids and blood.
Fluids and blood. And she says some things. She says, my stomach hurts, correct?
Yes.
Of course, she'd been shot in the back. Did you know entry and exit wounds? You can't tell.
I couldn't tell at that point. It wasn't evident to us, but from what I had heard from her husband, it was very clear to me that it was an accident from behind her. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm certainly going to come back to that.
Okay.
So she says her stomach hurts, and she says either, am I dying or am I going to die, something along those lines.
Yes.
Correct? And you hear that clearly.
Yes.
She's speaking clear enough for you to understand that.
Yes.
You are within a foot or two of her.
Yes.
Okay? Susan Hardy, Dr. Susan Hardy is at the head of the bed, correct?
Yes.
You're standing right next to her, correct?
Yes.
And you also hear Diane McIver say, it's an accident.
Yes.
Or it was an accident.
Yes.
There's no question in your mind she said that.
Correct.
She was coherent when she said it.
Yes.
At some point, you then walk outside because you have the jewelry, correct?
Yes.
And you are talking to Mr. McIver, who's right outside room 2 at that point.
Yes.
No doubt about that.
Yes.
All right. And you, I'm not going to play Tokyo, whatever that was. I didn't quite understand that. But you got close enough that you smelled alcohol.
Yes.
And do you remember when you were talking with me and Mr. Hyde, you said that because of your training, you can actually tell the difference between someone who's had a lot to drink, stinking drunk, and someone maybe who's had a glass at dinner, correct?
I said I would like to think I would know the difference, yes.
And do you think you knew the difference here?
Yes.
What was it like?
It didn't take my head off. It wasn't a punch to the face. So I didn't believe it to be an extraordinary amount of alcohol.
Okay. Did you tell Mr. Hyde and me that it was like one glass of wine at dinner?
I said that's what I would probably equate it to, yeah.
Okay. So then you go back into the room 2, correct? I'm
Correct.
sorry. You have a conversation with him out there.
Yes.
And you're trying to figure out still what's going on.
Yes.
Right? Because part of medical treatment isn't necessarily figuring out who did what, but what happened can be very important in figuring out what the treatment needs to be.
Yes.
Okay? So he says gunshot. Okay? Which is probably the most important thing a doctor needs to know, right? This is a gunshot.
Yes.
As opposed to a burning or a poisoning or whatever, right?
Yes.
And the second thing he says is, it was me, I had the gun, right?
He says it was an accident.
It was an accident, and in the same sentence, I had the gun in my hand.
Yes.
He wasn't like methodically thinking through different things to tell you. He said it was an accident, I had the gun.
It's not speculation, and the witness can't determine what.
I rephrase the question.
Can you imitate what you heard him say? And I'll give you what I mean by that. I don't mean the depth of his voice or the baritone or whatever, but did he say it was an accident, the gun was in my hand, and it went off? Or did it take 15 minutes to get those 3 sentences out?
When I asked what was going on, there was a delay for a notable 5-6 seconds.
Okay.
And then he followed up with the complete.
Do it for us, would you?
It was an accident. I had the gun in my hand, and it just went off.
Okay. So it's not 3 different statements he made. It was a sentence that had 3 clauses in it, correct? You're not.
I'm not a
English
grammar
major.
expert, but
You're not a grammar
I would take
expert.
that as 3 separate sentences.
And then you went back into the ER.
Yes.
Into room 2, you were in the ER.
Yes.
And continued to do the treatment, correct?
Yes.
Now, throughout the time, from the time you went out to the car, and you said this to Mr. Abadi too, there's not blood, a lot of blood in this scene, is there?
No.
Okay. If you're not a trained nurse, you wouldn't even, or doctor, you wouldn't even know that what we're dealing with here is an enormous amount of internal bleeding.
Correct.
I mean, if I saw her, I'd say she's unconscious, but I wouldn't know much else, would I? I'm a lawyer.
I guess not.
Clearly not shot in the head or the upper back or anything like that, correct?
Correct. You
You never heard Diane McIver say, "I was holding the gun"? Did you?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Did you ever hear Diane McIver say, "I was holding the gun"?
No.
Did you ever hear Diane McIver say, when asked, "Would you like to see your husband?" Did you ever hear her say, "No"?
I heard the question asked. I did not hear an answer.
At any time, from the time you helped bring that wheelchair in through the double glass doors, was she ever lying on a gurney out in the hallway for 40 minutes?
No.
Was she ever being ignored by the staff at Emory?
No.
Was she ever not being treated to the best of Emory's ability and everything they could do for her?
I don't believe so, no.
It was a double negative.
I'm sorry.
You were doing everything.
We were doing everything we possibly could, in my opinion.
And this is the last question, you've actually dealt with many gunshot wounds, haven't you?
That depends on what you mean by many. I mean,
I said one, but she's made me ask another. You were in Oklahoma. You were in
the witness, questionable strategy.
Totally her fault. When you were in Oklahoma, you were at a hospital that had a lot of gunshot.
trauma one, yes.
Trauma 1 in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
You have experience in this, don't
I
you?
do.
And the thoracic surgeon, did he have experience also because he came from Grady? Do you know?
I would guess he did, but I don't know what his exact experience is.
Any redirect, Mr. Abate? Just a few questions, Judge.
Brown, could more have been done if she was at a trauma center?
In my opinion, I think she would have been taken to surgery immediately if she was at a trauma center because their operating rooms are open 24/7.
And Mr. Samuel referenced the surgeon, the cardiothoracic surgeon, being from Grady. If he was at Grady at the time he was treating Ms. McIver, would he have more equipment and other life-saving measures that he could have used when treating Ms. McIver?
I don't know about equipment-wise, but I know that he would have had definitely a trauma surgeon there assisting him and back and forth with that.
And Mr. Samuel asked you about Dr. Hardy's question. How close was Dr. Hardy to Ms. McIver when that question was asked?
She was at the foot of the head of the bed, most of the time, so leaning down, trying to talk to her, maybe only a foot or two away from her face.
And do you remember where you were when that question was asked?
Which question?
By Dr. Hardy about would you like to see your husband?
I was further away. I was kind of down by her feet at that time.
And when Ms. McIver, when she actually spoke to you, and when she was speaking to other people, was she yelling or was she talking in a whisper? What was the tone of her voice?
It was very low.
Now, Mr. Samuel talked about the timeline. When he visited you last week, you went through the medical records with him, and you were able to come up with the timeline and determine when you believed, based on the records, when Ms. McIver and the defendant arrived. What time was that again?
I think we believe somewhere around 10:15.
10:15 would have been the time that you ran out with Ms. Neely to begin the treatment on Ms. McIver.
Correct.
Okay. And the second conversation that you had with Mr. McIver, where he told you the three sentences, the gunshot wound, it was an accident, the gun was in my hand. Did he ever tell you that when the gun went off, he was asleep?
I don't recall that.
Did he mention to you that he had some sort of sleep disorder?
No.
Okay. And did he tell you that at times he suffers from amnesia?
No.
Oh, and through your treatment, you said you you helped cut off the clothes of Ms. McIver. Were you able to determine where the gunshot wounds were, the entry and the exits were?
Yeah, when we turned her to her side to look at her back, we found it in the thoracic region of her spine.
And those are some big words. If I was to bring down Ms. Conberry, would you be able to point with the pointer where the entry wound on her back was?
Yes.
Okay. If you could step down for me. Very good use there. She's prettier than me.
Okay.
Where on her back was the entry wound on Mr. McIver? Okay. And would you consider that location Ms. McIver's lower back?
I would say it's her mid-back.
Okay. Where would you say is the lower back on a female Ms. Conner's side?
I would consider that the lumbar area, that would be down here, next to her hips.
Down here, right above the butt?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Conner. I don't think you have any further questions, Your Honor.
Briefly, non-presidential recross.
Every examination begins briefly. I just want to get the order of a couple of the statements that were made. She said, "Am I dying?" And you said, "No."
I said, no, we're helping you.
Right. And then she was asked by Dr. Hardy, "Do you want to see your husband?" Correct? It was after that she was asked that.
It was after that question.
Okay. And you didn't hear the answer.
I did not hear the answer.
All her clothes had already been taken off? Sheared off? Cut off?
I believe so.
She's got tubes, IVs,
Yes.
everything. She's in pain. She's already said, "My stomach hurts."
I'm sure she is in pain, yes.
Okay. It's not like one of us saying, "My tummy hurts," right? I mean, we're talking serious pain here, right? Yes?
Yes.
And she's getting ready to go up to the OR, right?
At that point, we didn't know we were going to the OR, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when Dr. Hardy asks the question that you didn't hear the answer to.
Yes, that was at the last question I heard asked was, do you want your husband to come in?
Thank you. That's all I have. Any questions from the jurors? Okay. You to get out to the valet area once you heard on the walkie-talkie that help was needed out there.
Maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. I was close. I was outside of 1 and 2, which is close to the entrance.
The procedures that were done in critical room 2 before Ms. McIver was moved up to the OR, were those done with any anesthesia administered, painkillers administered to Ms. McIver?
At the beginning, we couldn't give her anything for pain. That would lower your blood pressure even more. So we couldn't drop her pressure anymore. When your pressure is that low, your blood is not going to your vital organs, and that's how you have death to your organs. We were trying to avoid that. We did, however, give her a medication to sedate her when we intubated her before we took her up to surgery and before we cut open her chest.
Any follow-up, Mr. Abate?
And that was done, was that done after the question was asked if she wanted to see her husband?
The medication giving?
Yes.
Yes, that was after.
Sam?
Same thing, and the intubation is after the question. The medication intubation is all after.
After the question, do you want to see your husband, was asked.
You can't talk once you've been intubated, right?
That's our hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Next witness. Pardon? No, he can go where he wants to. I'm asking you all who your next witness is.
State calls Mary Wynn.
Is this a witness who will be as long as Ms. Brown, less long than Ms. Brown? So, not as long, but substantial. Okay. Can you say the last name again? You keep saying it to the back of the room.
Wyndham.
Wyndham. Okay. Are you okay for at least a direct exam of this witness, and then we'll take our afternoon break? Everyone's good? Okay, great.
Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you will give the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, ma'am, if you will. Have a seat. Good. Get as close to the mic as you can. For the purposes of the court's record, please state your name and say aye.
Mary Wyndham, last name Windom. Good afternoon. If you could please introduce yourself to the jury and give them a little bit of information about your educational background.
Hello, my name is Mary Wyndham. I am a registered nurse. I obtained my bachelor's degree at Emory University, Nurses School of Nursing. I have been working for Emory for about 2 years. I've been a nurse for 3. And my first job as a nurse is in the department, the emergency department at Emory, main campus on Clifton Road.
Okay. And Ms. Wyndham, to be an emergency room nurse, do you have to have any type of special training or certification?
Well, at Emory University, you go through the residency program, and you're in the program for about a year, but 6 months you are with an experienced nurse.
Okay.
And you obtain your training on the floor.
Okay. And on September 25th, 2016, were you in residency status or had you completed it?
I completed my residency.
Okay. And do you recall what shifts you were working on September 25th, 2016?
It was a weekend shift, they call it WEO, and it was 7P to 7A.
Okay. And when you are assigned to the emergency department, do you have specific assignments for the night?
Yeah, the charge nurse assigns our tasks for the day, so it varies from day to day.
Okay. And do you remember where you were assigned on that night?
I was in a zone, so I was in rooms 16 through 18.
Okay.
Yeah, 16 through 18.
And what is a zone?
A zone is when you're working on the floor, so you may be given either 3 or 4 rooms, and so wherever those rooms are, you would solely take care of the patients that are assigned to those rooms.
Okay. And how is a zone assignment for the night different than being assigned to a critical care room?
Well, the zone, those are the typical emergency room patients, so you may have someone that comes in with abdominal pain. You may have someone come in with a cold. You may have someone come in with sickle cell or anything like that. But the critical rooms are assigned for patients that are in critical or dire need. They may be a patient that, blood pressure is like 70 over 50 or something like that. They're unstable.
Okay. And,
stroke, heart attack, that kind of thing.
okay. And when you were assigned to zones, you said 16, 17, and 18? Where in the emergency department are they located?
So, when you're coming from the lobby, as soon as you come through the emergency room doors, you walk straight down the hallway, and the rooms are directly in the back. So you can see it from. So if you're standing in front of the entrance to the emergency department in the back, you can walk straight. There's a straight hallway, and you can walk straight down. You can see everything straight to the back.
Okay. And do you recall when there was a gunshot wound that came in that night?
Yes.
And how did you learn about the victim coming in with the gunshot wound?
Well, I saw them first.
Okay. And explain to the jury what you saw.
So I was in room 17. Room 17 is at the end of the hallway. So as soon as you come through the emergency department, I saw them bringing her in. And I was in my room. The door was open. I was about to administer medication to one of my patients that just walked in. The door was open, and I saw them. I just looked straight down the hallway, and I saw them rushing her into the room. So I just dropped everything and went to the room that she was in. And when I got in, that's when I asked what was going on, and they said that it was a gunshot wound.
Okay. Ms. Comrie is going to rewind us just a little bit, and I want you to tell me if you can see where your room would be from any of these angles. If you could look over here. You can step down and see it? Yes. You need some help? Are you sure? Which way would be the rooms that you were assigned to?
3, that's the door, so you're going to come straight down this hall.
Straight closet.
So, straight down, correct? So that's where I was, 17.
Okay. And you said you saw them bringing her into room number 2? Was that one?
I don't remember exactly which one, I just remember it was in one of the critical rooms.
Okay. You can have more seats. And you said you were about to give your patient some medicine?
I had just walked in the door into my room. The door was open.
And then what did you do after that, after you saw them bring it? Tell the jury what you saw when you saw them.
I saw her kind of like a group of people, and she's kind of leaning back. I didn't pay attention to who was bringing her back, but I just saw that her legs were kind of up, like someone was holding one leg, someone was holding the other leg, and they brought her into the room, and I saw that they were struggling to get her in the room. And once they got her in the room, immediately I just dropped everything and I ran to the room that they were in. And once they got her in the room, they had her on the bed backwards, and so we were like, turn her around. So when we turned her around, that's when we asked the question, what was going on, and they said it was a gunshot wound.
And let me go back just a little bit. You said you didn't pay attention to who was bringing her into the area.
No.
Do you remember if it was nurses that was bringing her?
I knew it was a nurse. I knew it was nurses. I remember it was one male, but I didn't pay attention to if it was one of our employees or what. My focus was, I just saw like the patient, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? So I just took off to the room.
And do you remember what the male was wearing?
Red shirt.
Okay. Do you remember anything else about him?
As they were bringing him back?
Bringing her back? Mm-hmm.
Bringing her back? Not when they were bringing the patient back.
Okay. And you just said that they had her on the bed backwards.
Yes.
And explain what that means.
Well, should I point it out on the?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So
if you touch it, it should make a mark.
Okay. So her head was here.
Okay.
And her feet was there.
Okay.
So we were like, no, turn her around. So we turned her around so that her head was on the pillow.
Okay.
Is there something about the bed that you couldn't just move the pillow? Like, is it structurally the bed such that
Yes.
you needed to rotate the patient?
Yes. The back portion of the bed goes up and down.
Okay.
And then it's also closest to the monitors and the oxygen.
Okay, so when you all turned her so that her head can be on the pillow, was she already receiving any type of fluids or anything like that, or were you just trying to get her situated?
We were trying to get her situated. She looked as though she was like she wasn't on the bed properly. In other words, she looked as though they were struggling to get her on the bed. And then we were like, okay, she's backwards. So it was multiple nurses that came in, and we all got together and got her straightened up on the bed and then turned to how she needed to be.
Okay, and do you remember which nurses were in the critical care room?
Vaguely. I remember some, but not all.
Okay, which ones do you remember?
I remember Allison was there. I remember Blair being there. I remember Nurse Natalie was there, and I remember Nurse Ryan. I remember he was there.
Okay, and when you came...
And Sarah. I remember another nurse, Sarah, was there.
Okay, and what about the doctors? Were any doctors there when you were moving her around?
They were coming in as we were moving. As soon as we got her situated, they were all coming in because they had made a call and said that they needed extra hands. So as we were turning her around, that's when Dr. Hardy I remember Dr. Hardy being there. I remember Dr. Abramoff being there.
Okay. And once you all got her situated and turned around, what did you do?
Well, the Dr. Hardy, she was asking for vitals. We were trying to get her hooked up to the monitor. She was asking for vital signs. She was asking for fluids. So I ran. I believe it was Allison and I ran to go get fluids. At that time, we still couldn't get as we were leaving, they were trying to get a blood pressure. When we came back, they still couldn't get it. So they were mainly trying to get vital signs on her.
Okay. And when you went into the room to put her on the bed, was the man with the red shirt in the room?
I do not remember.
Okay. And as far as you know, what was your understanding about what you all were trying to do to the victim in this case?
We were trying to get her stable
And what was the purpose of getting her stable?
so that we could get her transferred to Grady.
And do you know if anyone called over to Grady?
If I'm not mistaken, it was the charge nurse,
Okay, do you remember who that was?
Nicole.
Okay. And Nicole, what's her last name?
I don't remember her, I don't know her last name.
Okay. And once you were in the room, do you ever remember seeing the man with the red shirt back in the room?
Not back in the room.
Okay. And about how long were you in the room while the victim was there?
I was there pretty much the whole time. I was in and out. Like, say for instance, if they needed something, I would go and grab it. But for the most part, I was there in the room.
Okay. And when you were in the room, was the victim ever conscious?
At some point, she was conscious. Yes.
And did you ever hear her say anything?
Yes.
And explain to the jury what you heard her say.
When she first got there, she wasn't saying anything. We thought she was unconscious. And then all of a sudden she made like a moaning sound. And I remember standing like towards the head of the bed with Dr. Hardy. And Dr. Hardy and I both said, "Hey." And then she looked and she said, "Hey." And Dr. Hardy said, "What happened? Did you accidentally shoot yourself?" And she said, "Yeah. No, my husband shot me, but it was an accident."
Okay. And before Dr. Hardy asked her that question, did you all have any information about what happened to her?
No.
And when she regained consciousness, was she still fully clothed?
Somewhat. We were in the process of taking off her top to see exactly where the gunshot wound was, because all that we knew is that there was a gunshot wound.
Okay. And when you took off her shirt, were you able to locate the wound?
Not in the front. We were looking in the front to see if she shot herself in the front. But then when she said her husband shot her, and Dr. Hardy said, "My husband, he shot me, but it was an accident." We were trying to figure out where it was, so we rolled her to the side. We rolled her on her left side, and we were able to see it in her back.
Okay. And do you remember what part of the back the gunshot wound was in?
Yes. So for instance, if this was the spine, it was a lower portion of the spine, but it was like right close. It was close to the spine right here.
Okay. And once you saw the wound, did you see any blood or anything like that?
No, we didn't necessarily see any, no.
Okay. And what were the next steps after you all discovered where the injury was?
I remember Dr. Abramoff trying to use the ultrasound machine to see exactly like if the bullet was still there, if she had any bleeding or anything like that. We had like a bedside ultrasound machine that she was trying to use.
Mm-hmm. And after she said that it was an accident, did Dr. Hardy say anything back to her?
Yes. So when she said, she paused and she said, "But it was an accident." And the expression on her face was like, "Oh my gosh." And so Dr. Hardy reassured her. She said, it's okay, honey. No one's judging you."
Okay. And did the victim say anything in response to her saying that to her?
She didn't say anything at that point.
And from what you remember, did she remain conscious for the rest of the time that you were in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, for a while, but towards the end, she did not.
Okay, and when you say towards the end, describe what you're talking about.
Well, so she was conscious through the entire time, and then at one point when we were doing the ultrasound, I remember her saying, she said, it's hurting really bad, it's starting to hurt. And the doctor said, it's going to be okay. We're just trying, your abdomen is filling up with blood right now. She said, just hang on for us, just hang on for us. And then she was quiet for a moment. She was still looking around. And then she said, okay, it's starting to hurt really, really bad. It's hurting really, really bad. And she said, okay, bear with us, honey. We're trying our best. And then a little after that, she said, I'm dying. And Dr. Hardy said, someone, by that time I was towards the end of the bed near her feet, and Dr. Hardy said, someone please check her pulses. So I checked her pulses on her feet and by her ankles, and I told her, I said, we have good pulses, and her legs and everything are still warm. So she was still awake, and then of course that's when all the surgeons, they started to come in.
Okay, and you say she told you, and she said the initial statements. Do you remember where you were in the critical care room?
The initial statements, like?
You said you walked down to her feet after she asked you to take the pulse, or were you already down there?
I had already started to make my way down.
Okay.
We were trying to make space because there was a lot of people.
And how many surgeons came to the room?
I'm not sure how many. I just remember it was a lot in there, a lot of people in there.
Okay. And were you in there once the surgeons came in? Were you still in the room?
Yes.
And what happened once they got there?
I remember that they were assessing her. They were asking a lot of questions. It was so much going on because they were doing different things at different times. But I do remember them making an incision on the left side. Before they made the incision on the left side, I remember that, of course, when we do procedures like that, you have to, push some medication. I don't know what medication it was because I did not pay attention to that portion. But somewhere in between then, that's when she kind of faded out, unconscious at that time.
And while the surgeons are in there, is the door open? In the critical care rooms, we have the doors and we also have the curtains. The door was open because everybody was running in and out getting supplies. The curtain was closed, but there was a portion, there was like a gap in the curtain, so you could kind of see a little bit of who is, coming by. Okay. And do you remember after they did the incision, do you remember what happened next?
After they did the incision, she was kind of unconscious but we expected that because, of course we had to push, there was medication that was pushed to kind of have her go out before they make the incision.
Okay. And how long were they in there before they took her up to the operating room?
I'm not sure. I don't remember how long because at that point when it was a lot of the surgeons in the room, at that point I started to try to make my way out.
Okay. And when you left the room, so did you see her when she went up to the OR?
They asked me, as a matter of fact, they asked, there's an elevator, so they asked for me to go and hold the elevator because they were about to, they said, we're getting her ready. We're going to roll her up to the OR. And so they said to hold the elevator. Okay. And when I went to go hold the elevator, and I was waiting, but come to find out, they actually took a shorter route. They took another elevator up to the to the OR.
Okay. And what did you do after you stopped waiting at the elevator?
I waited, and then I was like, okay. So I said, let me go and figure out what because there was someone else with me. And I said, let me go and figure out what's going on. What's taking so long? So I went.
Remember who was with you?
Charlotte. She was she works with registration.
Okay. Do you know her last name?
Armstrong.
Okay. And you want to go see what was going on?
And so when I got on the inside of the emergency, back into the ER, I was told that they had already gone up on another elevator.
And before Diane was intubated, the victim, before she was intubated, did you hear her say anything?
No, the last thing that I heard her say was, "I'm dying."
Okay. And the guy with the red shirt, did you see him at all later on that night?
The only times that I remember seeing him was when we were in the room with a patient. I saw him a little bit out through the curtain, and then I saw him later on. The zone that I work in, we have like a section for the nurses to sit. So I was sitting there, and there's a room 11 and the family room. I remember seeing him standing in between room 11 and the family room, and he was talking to another gentleman.
Okay, and if you could step back down again and show me exactly where you were when you saw him. If it's a view that's possible, show me where you were when you saw him.
And now I turn to the right. So this is room 11, and then the family.
Hold on one second. Okay, we're going to take our break now, folks. If you get comfortable, wherever you want to get comfortable, we're going to reconvene before 4. Try to get you guys back in here before 4, unless you need more time. How are we looking at going past 5 today? Are we able to do that?
I can't today, sir.
Okay, we don't have to self-identify. I'm sure you guys have been talking. So we'll stop around about 5. And then I get 5:01. Someone's gonna come in here and grab you, or if we bleed a couple minutes past
I
that.
just have to get home to take over my small kids and husband.
Okay, got it. So we're gonna stop real close to 5 today. I just wanted to know as we're planning. So let's get you back out here as close to 4 as we can, provided that's enough time for you for this break. Don't talk about the case. We'll see you in a few.
For the jury.
Mr. Rucker, I'm sorry to interrupt, just need to ask. You had flagged an issue we might need to work through. We're not going to do that now because of the break. Do you have enough witnesses that will get through till 5 and we could talk about it after 5?
Absolutely, that's fine.
Okay, that's the plan. Thank you.
Back.
Jury's all present and accounted for, Your Honor. You may be seated.
Thank you, Deputy Kane. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to pick up where we stopped. Ms. Griffin, you were asking questions of Ms. Wyndham.
Okay, you were about to show us where you were when you saw the man with the red shirt.
Yes.
And can you see it from here, or do I need to press play?
No.
Okay.
So this is the family room right here, and this is room 11. So they were standing right in here. My chair is right there, the workstation right here. My chair was right here.
And who now describe the people that you saw?
It was 2 older white gentlemen. One had on a red shirt. I do not remember what the other gentleman had on, but I do remember that he was older. He's an older white gentleman.
Okay. Do you remember if he was taller or shorter than the guy in the red shirt?
I don't remember.
Okay. And are those the only 2 times you remember seeing the guy with the red shirt?
Yes. No. No, I actually saw, later on that night, I saw him again.
Okay. And if you could describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury when you saw him again.
He checked in to the emergency department to be seen.
Okay.
And I saw him going into room 11.
Okay. And if you could show her room 11 is again. And do you remember what time it was?
I do not. I don't remember what time it was.
Okay. Do you remember how long you saw him stay in room 11?
It was very brief.
Okay.
Sorry.
Keep going.
It was a very brief visit. It wasn't like a typical emergency room visit. It was very short.
Okay.
So as soon as the doctor went in, he was out.
Okay. And how did you know he was checked in?
We have a board on our computer, and from time to time we can scroll through to see like the waiting area, to see like who is coming next, who's going to come to our room next, and then we saw his name on the board to come to our zone.
Okay. And had you learned his name already?
No, we just saw the last name.
The last name. And what was the last name you saw?
Magada.
And if you could just explain a little bit more about this board. You say you were assigned to rooms 16, 17, and 18?
Yeah, so in our zones, we can either have 3 rooms or we can have 4 rooms.
Okay.
So I do distinctly remember having 16, 17, 18. However, if that was around the time that we had 4 rooms, then 15 would have been included with my rooms as well.
Okay. So on this board that you're looking on, can you see all of the rooms including your room? Okay. And when you saw his name on the board, is it a TV screen? Is it a whiteboard? What type of board is it?
It's our computer screen.
Okay. And you saw his name, and what, is there a word or a symbol or anything that lets you know that they're admitted?
Well, if they're just coming to the room, then their name shows up. But if they are being admitted, to the hospital, then there's like a little symbol. It's like a little bed that will, it's like a little blue bed that pops up next to their name, and it lets us know that patient is going to be admitted. And when the bed is ready, then if the room is ready, then of course the bed is there, and then it's like a little stick figure that's standing up, and it lets us know that the bed is ready.
Okay. And what symbol did you see next to his name?
There was a house.
And what does the house mean?
That you're about to be discharged.
Okay. And how soon after you saw him go into room 11 did you see the house pop up on the screen?
It was after the doctor went in. So when the doctor went in, he did his assessment, and then the house was up.
And
so it didn't take long at all.
Okay. And what's your estimate about time? About how long?
Maybe, and I think I might be stretching when I say 30 minutes.
Okay.
I might be stretching if I say that.
Okay. And when you saw the house, did you see him leave the room?
I did not see him leave the room. The nurse that was working with me in that zone, she was responsible for discharging him.
And who was that nurse?
Terry.
Do you know her last name?
No.
Okay. And that night, do you remember seeing a woman with a straw hat on?
Yes.
And if you could describe, or when did you see her?
When the patient was in the room, in the critical room, the curtain was kind of, it was closed, but it had like a little gap there. And I saw her come by, so I did not see the clothing that she had on. I was only able, from where I was standing, I was only able to see like her face, and she had like a cowboy hat on. She walked by, and that's when I was able to see her face.
Okay, and did she walk just pass by the room? Describe what she did.
So when she was coming by the room, I looked up and I saw her kind of like, walking by, but it was chaotic in the room, a lot of machines, a lot of blood. And I saw her kind of go, oh my gosh. I guess she was in shock, but it was like the expression like, oh my goodness.
Okay. And when you saw her come by the critical care room, was it before or after the surgeons came?
I don't remember if it was before or after the surgeons came.
Okay. You just said there was a lot of blood.
Yes.
When would she have started bleeding?
Well, she would have started bleeding after the surgeons. I do remember we had a rapid infuser to administer blood. So we had a lot of like, I don't want to say trash, but we just had like a lot of things going on in the room. So when she walked by, she saw the chaos that was going on in the room and the seriousness.
Okay. And did you work your complete shift that night?
I did.
And what time were you scheduled to get off?
Well, we clock out at 7:23 on the dot.
A.M.?
A.M.
Okay. And while you were there that night, did you see when the police arrived?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember which agency came to the hospital? Was it APD, Emory, police? Do you know?
Emory police was there as well as the local police. I'm not sure if it was APD or if it was DeKalb, but I remember they were there as well.
Okay. And while they were there, did you talk to any of them?
No.
Did any of them attempt to talk to you?
No.
Did any of them ask you for any type of information or to give a statement or ask you if you saw anything that night?
No.
Who was the first person that you talked to law enforcement-wise about this case?
The DA.
And do you remember who it was that you first talked to?
Yes, I can point her out if I see her.
Is it the tall lady?
Mm-hmm.
Brown skin?
Yes.
Curly hair on top?
Yes.
Is her last name Griffin?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember around when you talked to her?
Let's see here. It was, I want to say it was sometime during the fall, this past fall, I believe.
Of 2017?
Yes.
So in September of 2016, no law enforcement agency had talked to you?
Mm-mm.
Did you ever talk to a Detective Darren Smith from APD?
I do not recall, no.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna just go back just a little bit. If you could, Siri, please just go back to where the OR is and go inside not the OR, I'm sorry, the critical care room and go back inside. Okay, that's fine. Go back inside. When you heard the victim make the statements, where were you standing? If you could show me on the monitor.
The first statement, when she was saying that, when she first woke up, I was over here, on this side over here.
Okay, and that's when you said it was an accident? Okay, and when you heard Dr. Hardy say no one's judging you, where were you standing?
In the same spot.
Okay, and when she said her husband shot her, where were you standing?
In the same spot.
Okay, and when she said I'm dying, where were you standing?
I was standing, can you go back just a little bit? So I was standing at the foot of the bed.
Okay. And when you said you saw the lady with the straw hat come by, where were you at in the room then?
I was standing, yes, I was standing about here on the side.
On that side? And where was she standing on the outside when you saw her?
So, okay, so the curtain was pulled, but she was about, I saw her through here, this gap here.
Okay. Thank you. I have another question.
Samuel?
My name is Don Samuel.
Hi.
We haven't met before, have we?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think we do. So I just want to just go over the question that Dr. Hardy asked the patient, Mrs. McIver, was, did you accidentally shoot yourself? And Mrs. McIver responded, my husband shot me in the back, but it was an accident. Is that correct?
Yes.
So Ms. Hardy, excuse me, I shouldn't have said that. Dr. Hardy asked a question to which Diane McIver corrected her and said, no, it was my husband that shot me in the back, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you've just shown us there, but you were right as close to her as Dr. Hardy was, right? I mean, you're on opposite sides of the head of the bed when that question was asked, and the answer was, no, my husband shot me, correct? You got to say yes or no, so she.
Oh, correct, yes.
Okay. And the only other thing I'm going to ask you is, and what time is that about? Just give or take a half hour or so.
Oh, goodness. You mean what time of day or like, I don't
I
remember.
don't know what time it would be other than a time of day, but yes.
I don't remember.
I mean, was it around midnight, 11 o'clock, or you don't know at all?
I don't remember.
No problem. The triage is much later though, correct?
It's much later?
When Mr. McIver goes into the triage and then goes into whatever room it was you were talking about, that was many, many hours later. Am I correct?
Are you speaking of when he was checking in or
Yes.
when? Okay, I'm sorry. So that was much later.
Okay. And if you looked at the medical records, would that refresh your recollection as to what time he went into triage, went in, and not too long thereafter it came out? Could you look at the medical records and tell?
I may be able to. I guess it depends on what.
Okay. I'm just gonna.
Okay.
You're not in evidence. You shouldn't
Okay.
read that out loud. But I was just signal the page, and I was hoping maybe this would help.
So let's see here.
Don't say anything out loud. Just take a look at it, see if it refreshes your recollection.
Okay.
And if it does, say yes. I think he arrived at whatever and got discharged at some other time.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Does that refresh your recollection approximately what time he comes into the emergency room to be, I mean, he's there the whole time, but he comes in to be admitted or to be a patient and the time he leaves shortly thereafter?
Okay, yes.
Now, if you can have in your recollection refreshed, can you tell the jury what time that occurred?
4-ish when he checked in.
Okay, that's when he goes into triage and checks in with the doctor? In the
He
ER?
goes to the triage nurse first.
Okay.
And then comes back to the room.
And that's about 4 in the morning?
That's about 4-ish, yes.
4-ish in the morning? And what time does he leave?
Says 5.
Okay?
But do you remember it to be 5, or are you just reading what it says on the piece of paper?
I'm just looking what it says here, but I'm just saying that it wasn't a very long time. I just remember that it was brief, but I don't remember how long.
Okay.
It wasn't a very long time.
My questioning was not taking a very long time either.
Is that all?
That's all.
Any redirect?
Yeah. Okay, I just want to go back just a little bit.
Okay.
The time that you gave 4 o'clock, you said that was the time you checked into triage, right?
Yes.
And could you explain, is room 11 where triage occurs?
No. So the thing is, triage is in the front area.
Okay.
So once they're done being triaged and the room is available, so you get triaged first, and then you wait for the charge nurse to assign a room. Then once the room is available, then you're brought back to the room, and then at that point, that's when the physician comes to see you. And once he sees you, then you are discharged.
So you didn't see him when he got checked in at the front of the hospital?
Not in the front of the hospital, just when he was brought back to the room.
So when he's in the front of the hospital checking in at 4 o'clock, is there a doctor in triage, or is he being seen by a nurse?
Being seen by a nurse.
Okay. And so you don't know how long it took him in triage?
No.
You just remember when you saw him come into room 11, it was just a short period of time.
Correct.
That he saw the doctor.
Correct.
Okay. And when you first came to the room, like you said, it was a lot of people in the room?
In the room
In the critical care room, I'm sorry.
when I first got in the room, initially, no, it was not a whole lot of people in the room, no.
Okay. And did Dr. Hardy come in after you?
She did. She got there maybe like a few seconds after me.
Okay. And you said you were going in and out of the room?
Yes.
And so is it possible that you didn't hear all of the conversation between Dr. Hardy and the victim?
It is a possibility.
Okay. No question.
Any questions from the jurors? Okay, send them to the left, please.
I'm can just ask one more question, I'm sorry.
Okay.
If you could show me where Dr. Hardy was standing,
At what point?
when she first came in the room.
When she first came in the room, when she came in, she was about here. This is where I remember the questioning. When she first came in, she was at the end. She was asking us questions, and then when the patient started to move a little bit, she walked about here, and I was getting about it.
Okay, Deputy King, if you would collect the jurors' questions, please. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay. Ms. Wyndham?
Yes.
You mentioned that at some point law enforcement showed up, Emory and some local agency, I think you said. Were you the person who reached out to have law enforcement come to the hospital?
No.
Do you have any direct knowledge as to why Mr. McIver would have gone through the triage process and ultimately gone to room 11 or whatever room you went to? Were you part of that process?
I was not a part of the process, but on the sheet, on the computer screen, it gives us a brief overview of what they're coming in for.
Okay, so if you were about to tell them what you read on the screen, it would be because you saw it on the screen, not because you were involved in interacting with Mr. McIver.
Correct.
Okay. Any follow-up, Ms. Griffin?
No.
Mr. Samuel? No? All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Next witness,
Yes, Your Honor, the state calls Ms. Shahinda Saikawala.
Ms. Yelland-Raju.
Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give to the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, can you please state your name and spell it for the court and speak loudly, please?
Shahinda Saikawala, SHAHINDA-CYCLEWALA.
You can be seated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Saikawala, and thank you so much for being here today with us. Ms. Salvar is beautiful. Why don't you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Shahinda Saikawala. I am an RN. I work at the Cat Medical Center now.
Ms. Saikawala, I'm interrupting you only
Yes, sir.
because I need to make sure folks can hear the important things you have to say. Can you move that microphone down towards you? And then if you can sit or move as close to the microphone as possible, that'll help everyone in the courtroom hear what you have to say. Thank you. So you were mentioning you're now at the Cat Medical Center.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Prior to that, where did you work?
At Emory University Hospital main campus emergency room.
Okay, and where is the main campus located?
Clifton Road.
Richard, and how long did you work at Emory?
I was there for a total of 6 years.
And you were a nurse there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so how long have you been a nurse for?
5 years.
5 years. So were you working there September 25th of 2016?
Yes, ma'am.
What shift were you working?
The 7 p to 7 a night shift.
7 p.m. to 7 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That night when you were working, did you observe any, or did you receive any critical care patients?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain to the jury what patient you saw come in?
Mrs. McIver was one of them.
And lean into the mic a little bit if you can. Sorry, I'm soft-spoken too, so the court reporter can take down what you're saying. So you saw Mrs. McIver. Can you elaborate on that? What did you observe?
I was not involved in the care at the time of the visit, but I only was able to see her coming in on a wheelchair, escorted by a couple of my other fellow nurses, and Mr. McIver was behind them.
Okay, I'm going to show you a video.
Okay.
And if it's easier for you to step down, you can, if you want to come there. Can you tell me what this looks like?
I can't see.
If you want to come down here, it might be easier. Leave your jacket there. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Okay, so can you just tell me when to stop?
Yeah.
And you can tell me where you were standing.
I was inside.
Inside, so this is the waiting room?
Yes.
Okay. So we've gone through the door. Tell me where to stop.
This right now.
In this area, what is this over here?
That's the nurse's desk.
Okay, so you were standing here.
I wasn't standing. I was in my head, right in front of the room actually. Close to the room.
So close to this room?
Yeah, the critical care room actually.
Okay.
Literally, they were at the door trying to go in, and I was passing away.
Okay. So can you kind of point out with your finger around where you were standing?
I was walking and coming from here, going this way.
Okay.
To the other side of the mall.
Okay. You can take a seat again. Thank you. And do you remember around what time this was?
No.
No. Do you remember what time in the shift span it probably was?
No.
Okay, that's fine. So were you walking back from another patient, or were you going somewhere?
In the middle of my care, I don't remember exactly
Okay.
where and why I was passing, but I was assigned a nurse. I was one of the working nurses that night.
Okay.
So.
And so you said that you didn't participate in the care of Mrs. McIver.
No, ma'am.
But did you observe anything while they were putting her into the room?
You tend to get nosy. We just saw that she was in a lot of distress and that I think she was bleeding out and they were trying to get her blood. But that's all I knew.
And who was carrying her in?
Oh, she was on the wheelchair. A couple of my staff members, I don't remember exactly which nurses had her.
Okay.
And then I didn't see her. Once she was in the room, I did not see who put her in the bed.
Okay. Did you see her husband?
Yes, he was right behind.
Do you remember what he was wearing?
A golf shirt and jeans, probably.
Okay. Did you speak to him at all?
No.
Okay. Can you describe, do you remember anything else about him?
Oh, he was very flustered, and I shot her.
Okay, so did you hear him say anything?
I heard him say, and this is what I heard, and it was in passing, I was passing through, that I was cleaning my gun in the bathroom and I shot her.
I'm sorry.
I was cleaning my gun in the bathroom and I shot her.
And you heard him say that?
Yes, from him, not from anybody else.
Just to be sure, so the hallway is there. When you were passing him, were you close to him?
Yes.
I'm going to walk towards you. Just tell me when to stop.
Sure.
When I'm close. Was he this close?
Much closer.
This close?
Yeah, I was literally here and we got closer.
Like right here?
Yeah.
So you were passing him when you heard him say that he was cleaning his gun?
Yes.
And he shot her?
Yes.
Did he mention where he shot her?
No, I did not. Because it was in passing, it was so quick, that was the only part of the sentence that I heard.
Okay. And make sure I'm writing this down right. I was cleaning.
My gun. I shot her.
Can you say where?
I heard bathroom.
Do you remember where in the sentence he said bathroom? You get to talk in
I was cleaning my gun in the bathroom.
In the bathroom. When I shot her?
Yes.
Okay. Did you share this information with any other nurses?
Not really, no.
Did you speak to the police afterwards?
No.
Did you call the police about it?
No.
Okay. Later on, did you participate in the care of Mrs. McIver at all during the night? Did you observe anyone else later on with her husband?
A family member, probably. I don't know who she was, but a lady in cowboy hat. That's the only significant thing I remember about her.
Do you remember when she arrived?
Sometime later.
Sometime later. Do you remember where you first saw her?
I observed her at the charge nurse's desk.
Okay. Can you show me where that is in this video?
Oh, sure.
Charge nurse desk? Is that up front where the waiting room is, or is it closer to
The main charge nurse's desk.
Where is that?
Not this one.
Okay. So if I go closer, there's a critical care room.
Yes.
This is the hallway that you were walking down.
This one.
Right here. So you were essentially walking from the charge nurse's desk area down the hallway.
But this was sometime later.
This was later.
Yeah.
And then where did you see the lady in the hat?
At the charge nurse's
At the
desk.
charge nurse's desk. Those are all my questions for now, Your Honor.
Mr. Stan?
Good afternoon. My name is Don Samuel. We've never met before, have we?
No, sir.
Okay. How long were you with Emory?
I was with Emory for 6 years
Okay.
in all.
Always in the ER?
No. First year I was a nurse tech. I was finishing my nursing school. When I graduated, Emory kept me over, and I was in the ER at Midtown location first for about a year and a half.
Okay.
I transitioned to the ICU for almost 2 years at Midtown.
Okay.
And then I transferred from there in June 2016 to the main campus ER.
Okay. And now you've left Emory altogether?
I've left Emory altogether, yes.
you're
I'm at DeKalb Medical Center now.
Okay. And when did that happen?
December 18th, 2017 was my first day at work at DeKalb.
And was there a reason why you switched from one to the other?
Better remuneration, better pay.
More money. Okay. So let me ask you what you remember about that night, okay?
Sure.
What time did you come on work that day?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. And I was taking notes. I want to make sure I got it right. You see the wheelchair coming in with Ms. McIver in the wheelchair.
Yes.
Was she talking to anybody?
No.
Okay.
She was almost passed out. She was in...
Okay. Who was with her?
My fellow nurses, I don't remember who it was, and Mr. McIver.
Okay. Tell me where they were standing in relation to the
They
wheelchair.
were wheeling her in the room.
Where were people positioned around the wheelchair?
The two nurses were holding the wheelchair at the back.
Okay.
Mr. McIver was right behind them.
Okay. So you got two nurses at the back of the wheelchair moving it forward.
Yes.
And Ms. McIver was following from behind.
Not too far away. He was right behind
I
them.
didn't say too far away,
Okay.
just from
Well,
behind.
You did that.
Right behind.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Nobody's holding her legs or anything like that.
Not at that time. They were almost entering the room at the time.
Okay. When they get into the ER, does Mr. McIver go in and take her off, participate or help in taking her off the wheelchair and putting her into the bed?
I was in passing, so I wasn't even there to witness that. In the room. I did not see her in the room when she got.
Do you remember when you gave your statement to the DAs? You gotta say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Didn't you tell them that when the other nurses were putting her on the bed, he was outside?
No.
You don't remember telling them that?
I don't think so. I didn't see her get on the bed, sir.
Did you tell them when Mrs. McIver was being placed onto the bed, Mr. McIver said to her in the hallway the following? Did you say that? Who among these people was talking to you?
Mr. Adam?
Adam Abadi?
Yes.
Who else?
Johnny?
Stand up.
Jana?
Ms. Griffin?
Miss Griffin, yes.
The two of them?
I didn't remember her last name.
The two of them?
Miss Griffin and Miss Siri.
Okay, so the three of them were questioning you, and did you tell them, I'm going to ask it again, when Mrs. McIver was being placed onto the hospital bed, Mr. McIver said to her in the hallway the following?
No,
You never said that to them.
no. They were wheeling her in the room.
Listen to my question.
Because she's answered it now 3 times.
Yeah.
She has answered your question now 3 times, so ask a different question.
I'm not going to get a fourth.
Nope. Shouldn't have had a third, but there was no objection.
So you didn't see them, and at some point you're just walking down the hall,
Yes, sir.
and you're passing by Mr. McIver, correct? Mm-hmm. And you get about this close, and who's he talking to?
I don't know who he was talking to. I was
Wasn't talking to
passing.
you.
No, he wasn't talking to me.
He was talking to space?
I don't know who he was talking to,
Was he
sir.
talking to the wall?
I don't know.
Your Honor, that's asked and answered.
Okay, well, we're done with that.
Was there anybody else that he was talking to when he was talking about being in a bathroom?
Again, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I didn't ask and answer
It's a
that.
different question. Was there any, you asked your question.
Was there anybody he was talking to, or you just walked by and heard him talking in
Sir,
space?
this was a critical patient, and this was a critical patient being put in the room. All staff rushes to try to help.
Okay.
So there was multiple people over there. I have no way of knowing who he was talking to because I was passing. It was so quick.
You were walking the entire time.
Yes.
You never stopped.
Well, for that moment when they were right in my face when I was passing through,
They?
the staff members, the wheelchair, and Mr. McIver.
Was this happening while she was still in a wheelchair?
Yes.
That he made this statement?
Yes, he was speaking it, yes.
Okay. So the other two nurses would have heard the same thing, because they were right
Probably.
in
I
front of
don't
him.
know who was that. I
didn't
don't
say
know
who.
what they heard.
Listen to my question.
Yes, sir.
One of us will talk at a time. I'll let you answer every question I ask.
Objection, Your Honor, she answered the question.
He didn't speak over her answer, but I'll let you ask it again.
You're saying that this didn't happen when she was being put in the bed, but while she was still in the wheelchair?
Yes.
And there were two nurses standing right behind her, pushing the wheelchair,
Right, nobody was standing. Everybody was in a hurry trying to get her to the bed. Yes.
and he was behind them,
Yes.
and everybody was rushing.
Your Honor, I think it was established.
I would like to be able to answer the question. To say asked and answered is not, if it's not clear,
Okay.
I'm entitled to ask a question to make it
There's
clear.
a difference between not clear and not liking the answer you get. So
I am getting a different answer every time I ask. I would like to be able to get a clear answer, where this occurred, who she was talking to,
Okay.
who would have heard it.
I understand what you want. I disagree that you've gotten a different answer every time you ask. You ask and get the answer the same a few times, and then don't seem to like it, and then you ask the question in a different way. But I'll let you continue. No more objections for a minute. I'll manage this for a little bit. If we are circling around and around and around the wheelchair and who's in line where, then we'll move on to somewhere else.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I would like to start over, and I'm sorry if it's repetitive. This occurs while she is still in the wheelchair, not being put on the bed.
Not yet, no.
There are two nurses behind her
Yes.
pushing the wheelchair.
Yes.
And you don't know who those two nurses are.
I don't remember, sir, sorry. I don't remember now.
They were both Emory nurses.
Yes, of course.
Behind them is Mr. McIver.
Yes.
They are walking, I can't use that machine, but in one direction towards the room, correct?
Yes.
How close are they to the room?
Almost. The room is here and they're literally right here. Like they're
Okay.
almost making it into the room.
Okay. And you're walking the opposite direction, right? Correct or not?
I'm coming toward them, but yeah, yes.
I mean, they're walking with the wheelchair, getting to the room, and you're coming from the other way.
Towards them, right.
Passing them.
Yes, sir.
You're not going to go into the room.
I'm not, no.
You are not joining
No,
them.
because I have no idea what's going on, yes.
Well, it's like being on
Patient
the
is just
interstate.
coming in, yes.
Like being on the interstate, you're going to pass, right?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay. And you hear Mr. McIver saying something, correct? You got to say yes or no.
Yes,
And how close is he to the two nurses
Right behind them.
right behind them? I'll do what they do. Can you tell me when I'm close enough to you that I'd be like the two nurses who were close to him when he made this statement?
Yes.
Like this?
Yes.
Okay, so we're like
Your
18
side-
inches apart.
Your side, yeah.
So when he made this statement, he was 18 inches away from the two nurses who were pushing the wheelchair.
From me, when he's
The
talking.
question is how far, if you recall, was Mr. McIver from those two nurses pushing the wheelchair? Not how far from
He
you.
was right behind them.
He was right behind them?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's the question I was asking. How close to them is he?
Right behind them.
18 inches?
I can't count. I mean, I can't give you a
As close as I can.
specific.
Your Honor, we've established it.
We haven't actually, because she was answering a different question, it turns out, so.
He was right behind the nurses. 18 inches is how much? This much?
So why don't you do with Mr. Samuel what you did with Ms.
Okay.
Yelland-Raju and have him stop when he gets as close to you as Mr. McIver was to those other
The
nurses,
nurses, okay.
whatever it was.
Not in relationship to me, in relationship to the other nurses.
Yes.
Do you mind if I use your term? Can I use your
That'd be okay.
Would that be okay?
For you, yes.
Okay.
High maintenance.
They're going to charge me for this. I have no idea how to draw a wheelchair. How's that?
Sure.
I'm a lawyer. Ms. McIver's in the wheelchair, correct? Okay. This nurse 1 and nurse 2 is behind the wheelchair, correct? You don't know who either one of them are. Mr. McIver is
Right behind them.
between them.
Right behind them.
You draw where Mr. McIver is. Your Honor, may I have her?
You may.
Put where Mr. McIver is. Okay? Now I'm going to put a 3. He's right between 1 and 2, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And they're going into
the room.
ER2. And you're heading this way. They're about to make a left turn into
Right
ER2.
here.
You're here?
Yeah,
When
they're
do
right
you-
in front of the room. They're about to enter the room.
And where do you hear Mr. McIver say it happened in the bathroom?
I am coming from here. I'm right here.
You're right
Down
there.
Yeah.
So number 4 is here. Okay.
So I stopped because patients started coming right at me. I was like, whoa, and I stopped.
Okay. And he just says, as you're passing by, I was cleaning my gun in the bathroom when I shot her.
I heard that sentence, yes, sir.
You said he was very flustered, is that right?
Yes, sir.
He was very agitated.
Not agitated. He looked very like, when something happens that's so untoward, how are you going to look?
You tell me.
Flustered was the only word I could think of.
Describe flustered. I
He
don't
looked
know.
flushed. He looked pale in the face, flushed, and he was just very, I don't know what word I'm looking for. Nervous?
Nervous?
Yep.
Later, someone told you something else about what had happened, correct?
No?
Well,
Your Honor, objection, this is calling for hearsay.
Well, it could get there, we'll see. That's just kind of a vague question. But she said no. Maybe because of what the question asked.
were you later told, and I'm not going to do content, by other staff members, the circumstances in which Ms. McIver was shot inside of the vehicle? Were you told that by other staff members?
There was no.
You never heard anything else from any other staff?
Well, we heard stuff, but I didn't try to get into other conversations because I don't like to jeopardize patients' privacy and patients' confidentiality, so I don't like to involve myself in conversations that way outside in the hallway about patients. So no, I did
And
not.
Did you tell anybody, although all the nurses that you were colleagues with, or any doctors, or any techs, or anybody, when you heard what the other circumstances were, that this was not what Mr. McIver said to you earlier?
No, I did not.
You never said that to anybody?
No, I did not.
Did you tell these 3 people that's precisely what you said to other people?
Yes.
You did tell them that? This is my question again.
Okay.
Did you tell the body, the Griffin, who over there? Siri, I'm sorry. I apologize, I'll get it right next time.
No, you won't.
We'll get it right on that. That what they said happened was not what Mr. McIver said to you. Did you tell them that you had conversations with nurses?
He didn't tell me anything.
Let him finish his question,
Okay.
because I gotta make sure you're following
Getting
this question.
confused, yeah.
Disputing their version, these other nurses, what they said had happened in the vehicle.
Much later in the night, but like I said, I did not involve myself in the conversations. I heard things, but everybody was busy trying to take care of her at the time.
I need to get an answer.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. Keep
Did
asking.
you tell nurses at Emory that what they were saying about the circumstances was inconsistent with what you had been told standing behind the wheelchair?
No.
Okay. That's the first question. And the second question is, did you tell him and her that you did have that conversation?
I didn't have a conversation, but I did tell them that this is what I heard, and then the other staff was saying
Let
that.
her finish.
If you listen to my question.
Objection, Your
Did
Honor.
you
Stop, Mr. Samuel, stop. She was answering in a way that was clearing something up for me at least, but you spoke over her. So let her finish, and then I'll let you ask the question again. I am now understanding a little bit more why you're asking some of the same questions so many times. So if you'd repeat what you were saying, and then Mr. Samuel will go on.
Later on in the night, if your question was that there was talk, but among staff, that there was other information and other stories per se, yes, I heard, but I did not share what I had heard to them. I just had thoughts in my head, but when I did speak with Officer Griffin and Adam and Ms. Siri, I did share that with them, yes.
Here's what I'm asking, what
Yes,
you
sir.
shared with them.
I did.
I haven't finished the question.
Okay.
Did you share with them that you told the nurses at Emory that you knew a different version than what they were saying?
I did not tell any nurses what I had heard.
Did you tell them?
No. Why would I say that?
Okay.
Done?
Yes, but I'd like to approach.
Can we wrap up
Yes?
this witness and then we'll talk?
Yes?
Okay. Do you have any redirect?
Just one quick question. Ms. Eckel, how long have you been a nurse for?
5 years.
So can you infer when a wheelchair is brought into critical care, and what can you infer they're going to do with the patient on a wheelchair?
Well, we need some serious stuff done to that patient right away.
Are they going to keep her on the wheelchair?
No.
What are they going to do with
No,
her?
they're going to immediately put her on the stretcher.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
You're welcome.
Any questions from the jurors? Okay. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You can step outside. You don't happen to have a 3-minute witness? Not on my best day. Okay. We're going to stop then, ladies and gentlemen. There's some things I need to talk with the lawyers about. And I'm going to let you guys go for the day. We're going to try to start crisply at 9, if you all can be here. And again, if you are able to coordinate in your schedule such that we can go a little bit past 5, You'll notice I don't ever ask them if they can go past 5. They have to. It's up to you all, but I know you're juggling a lot of things. We all are. As you enjoy the basketball tournament tonight or your book or whatever you do, please stay away from information about this case as you've been doing throughout the trial. And we'll see you refreshed tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. And Juror 7, if you don't mind staying, we'll get you out of here as well, but the rest of you can go.
All right, for the jury. All right, you may be seated.
Where did Juror 7 go? Oh, well, no, she's right there. Do you, Mr. Harvey, Mr. Samuel, and one of you want to come just chat real briefly with number 7 to see if it's something that we then come out here and put up, or whomever? I don't care which one of you. I just would like one of you to be there.
I'll come up.
Okay.
I want to hear what you say what the problem was.
I don't care. Here, this is what we're going to be talking about. Yeah.
If the defense doesn't want to do it, the state doesn't want to do it, I think she cleared it out with the emphasis on the...
Well, but she wanted to talk, so let's just go back to the jury room. I'll see you there.
All right.
In the jury room?
You mean back in the chambers, right?
Well, if she's back there and you can get through that door, I'll just come around.
I'll let you in. You want to let you in?
Oh yeah, maybe we don't go in there. Who knows what's going on in there?
You want to just meet you in the back?
Yeah, let's do that. We're going to decide in a minute what we're going to do with all that. Right now, it's just you two. All right. You all can be seated. Mr. Samuel and Mr. Harvey, if you'd speak real briefly with Mr. McIver.
Okay, we've informed Mr. Garber exactly what the jury and we continue to want the jury to continue to serve without using an alternative.
Okay. And there's no issue with the fact that it was Mr. Harvey, Mr. Samuel, Mr. Rucker, myself, and Juror 7 who had the conversation to establish what the issue was. Juror 7 is still here, could come back into court if we need to recap it in front of your client.
We have informed our client exactly what happened in the back room. He has agreed that he wasn't there. He's okay with that and has agreed with our decision. And he can say it to you if you wanted to ask him on the record. He's standing right next to me now for the record.
No, I take your word for it, Mr. Samuel. If you could let Juror 7 know she's free to go, and we'll see her tomorrow morning, but she can go home for tonight.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. I will make Court's Exhibit 1 the note that Juror 7 wrote. I'm going to hand that to Ms. Harris in a moment when I'm not talking, so she can take her hands off her stenography machine, but this will become Court's Exhibit 1, which prompted the discussion we just had with Juror 7.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we had a bench conference. Was it before Nurse Brown testified or in the midst of her testimony? Either just before she testified or in the midst before. Mr. Samuel wanted to approach. There was a concern about what might be discussed concerning to whom Nurse Brown released the jewelry from Ms. McIver. I agreed preliminarily with Mr. Samuel's analysis and asked Mr. Abate not to explore with Nurse Brown why she did what she did with the jewelry and why she didn't do what she might normally have done with the jewelry. And I offered to reconsider at the conclusion of direct and cross. I wasn't asked to revisit it by the state, but based on what I heard in direct and cross, I wouldn't have changed my mind on that. The state didn't go to the area that I said don't go to. Anything more you want to get on the record concerning that, Mr. Samuel?
No, all went well.
Okay. The way we have been handling the brief sidebars when we get juror questions is that the attorney's approach, and then fairly routinely, hasn't been every time, but most of the time, whichever defense attorney is at the sidebar takes the proposed questions back to the rest of the defense team to include the defendant. They confer and we move forward. Do you have any objection to continuing to work it that way, Mr. Sanders?
That's fine with us.
Okay. that's
Well,
fine.
other than the fact that Mr. Harvey said the whole enterprise.
I didn't ask Mr. Harvey, but I'm well aware of his perspective.
Do you want to hear it again?
Maybe later. I've heard a lot of things multiple times today, so I'm done with that. That's what I wanted to get on the record. We can get on the record whatever the two sides want concerning the remote testimony, but I'd like to start with whatever you wanted to discuss, Mr. Samuel, concerning Nurse Saikowala's testimony.
Your Honor, I'm going to make part of the record a 2-paragraph statement of the witness that was supplied to us, Lord knows how many months ago, which summarizes Nurse Saikowala's testimony. It shouldn't come as any surprise to you that I was quoting it meticulously with comments and everything as to what she told the 3 people who apparently participated in the debriefing. There's no tape of it, so I couldn't play a tape of her. If there is a tape, it's never been supplied. We have a summary.
So it's a summary, it's not even in quotation marks.
It's in quotation.
The whole thing?
This is what it says.
Okay. Read slowly for the court reporter.
When Mrs. McIver was being placed onto the hospital bed, Mr. McIver said to her in the hallway the following, colon.
So I'm going to pause you for a minute. So said to her, already this is in not first person.
That's right.
Okay.
Said to her the following, colon, open quote, I accidentally shot my wife in the back, comma, it happened in the bathroom, period, close quote. It then goes on a couple sentences. Mr. McIver said he was trying to clean his gun, not in quotes. And then later, in the second paragraph, 2 sentences down, and now I'll quote the paragraph, there's not a quotation mark on it. Later, comma, she was told by other staff members that Mrs. McIver was shot inside of the vehicle, period. She responded by saying that this was not what Mr. McIver said to her earlier, period.
And you're construing that to be she responded to the nurses as opposed to she responded to the assistant district attorney she was speaking with?
Right. That's my understanding.
Okay. Well, just hearing what you read, I think it's important that you eventually get a hard copy of that. Let's make it a court's exhibit. As long as Mr. Samuel blesses the copy you've got, let's make it part of the record. I'll tell you the way you were asking the question, I thought that was going to be all one sentence, where the she responded was more clearly to the nurses when they told her the story that was different from what she believed she heard Mr. McIver say.
But the response, she's only responding to what other staff members said in that sentence. You'll see the sentence, they're not asking her anything. She's not responding to them, meaning Mr. Abadi, she's responding to what the staff members said to her.
Okay.
I'd like to see their rough notes, number one. I would like to know, was there a tape? Do all 3 of them have rough notes? I want the rough notes of all of them. I want to know if they knew that she was going to say something inconsistent when they put her on the stand, and therefore didn't ask her any of the questions that she contradicted when she testified. And if so, there's all kinds of relief we're going to be entitled to. I also object to Ms. Griffin remaining in the courtroom from here on in, because she's going to be a witness in this case. If these are the types of summaries we are getting, she is going to be a witness in this case. We're going to give her a subpoena today, and she needs to excuse herself from the courtroom, because we insist on the rule of sequestration for someone like this, who's not simply going to be organizing witnesses.
Okay.
I'm going to give you, I don't know what number to put on it.
Well, I'm going to call it Court's Exhibit 2.
Okay. Page 2, which has the summary that I've been quoting.
Okay. Can you confirm, you're doing it right now, that what they've got?
Given your protestations, I wanted to make sure, it's kind of over the top, given the circumstances, but I wanted to make sure So that's why I took it.
And that's going to be more courts two.
Courts 2.
Page 2 is her. She's responding, obviously not to anything other than what she was just told. And then it says, what Mr. McIver said to her earlier, this interview is whatever, months later. She's talking about earlier in the day.
Okay. There are clearly multiple ways to read it, because when you said it out loud, my initial reaction was, when you read it to me just now, not the questions you were asking, I'm reading it differently, but you've made some inquiries to the state that I think are appropriate, and we'll follow up on that. So, Mr. Rucker, one thing that Mr. Samuel has asked about is whether there are raw notes available. I don't know that they'll necessarily go straight to him. They might go through me first. From, in this situation, the interview of Ms. Saikowala, and so there would be notes either from Mr. Abate, Ms. Yelland-Raju, or Investigator Griffin. I mean, you may not have them right here, but what I'd like is to get them tomorrow morning.
Sure.
From either an affirmative representation that each of the three doesn't have them, or it's 3 sets of notes, just to that interview.
I understand.
Mr. Samuel doesn't have a copy of any recording of that interview. Is that because there isn't one?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then what are your thoughts about Ms. Griffin, not Attorney Griffin, but Investigator Griffin, remaining in court going forward?
You know, I thought we had a good working relationship about how we kind of allow the rule of sequestration to be kind of relaxed. So if there is, if that is kind of how we're going to operate going forward, then that's fine. I don't think that Investigator Griffin needs to necessarily be outside of the courtroom. I don't expect that if you call her as a witness, her testimony would be affected in any way by sitting in here.
What about a middle ground? You and your team are in a good position to know this is a witness whose the only way this witness's statements to the state have been memorialized would be through something that Investigator Griffin was involved in preparing.
Right.
That witness, it might make sense, as I know you've got a team supporting you, for Investigator Griffin to be outside. But if it's a witness where she didn't meet the person, or she was there, wasn't a note taker, or this or that,
Or it's taped.
or it's taped, or you just know going in, it's not controversial. I'm making this up, but someone who did the forensic work on the seat in the expedition. That might be a middle ground. I don't think a wholesale removal of Investigator Griffin is necessary. I have observed how she's providing important logistical support for you all, and she clearly knows the case well. But maybe the two sides could confer and identify if there are any other witnesses where it is reasonably foreseeable in the way, for example, you asked Investigator Jackson some questions about the interview with Ms. Calhoun.
Right.
It would have been, I think, problematic for Investigator Jackson to have been in court while Ms. Calhoun was testifying.
Right.
And we've bumped into a potential scenario where that's arisen with Investigator Griffin. And in saying all this, I don't mean to suggest Investigator Griffin's done anything wrong. It was appropriate for her to be in here. That's what everyone agreed to. In the same way that the defense has an investigator in here. Where it becomes problematic would be if the only witness you could call, other than an attorney, would be Mr. Hyde. And Mr. Hyde was sitting in here when a witness said something that diverged from something you got from the defense.
I understand.
So,
You know I do. We'll have her outside, no problem.
Okay. So what I'd like to see then in the morning would be the raw notes from any of the three, all of the three who were present for this discussion with Ms. Saikowala. Okay. Now it's of the record, this summary of what she had to say. a higher court, if it ever gets there, can determine how the sentences should be read. Was there other relief you were seeking in connection with Nurse Saikowala's testimony? We will revisit it all if I decide there's something you ought to see in the notes, but otherwise, I think that chapter's closed.
Unless in interviewing her this morning or last night, they learned that the summary they gave us was inaccurate. For example, where the statement was made, not when he was being put on the bed, but while there were two nurses present with a wheelchair, still out in the hall. This is not what the statement says. The statement says he's out in the hall and they're putting the patient on the bed inside the ER.
Okay.
Did they know before they put, having given me a statement that they now know is inaccurate, did they know when they put it on the stand that the statement they gave me was inaccurate and didn't tell me ahead of time? Even if it's work product, if they know the statement is inaccurate, they have a duty to, A, because it's Brady if it's inconsistent, B, to at least correct it if it's inconsistent.
Okay. If it's materially inconsistent, I'm following. Okay. What about what's the last name of the person you were hoping to?
Skype.
Yes.
Red. It's Alicia.
Okay, there it is, 52. So I read the state's motion, read some case law, and then last but never least, Rule 9.2. Do you, Mr. Abate, you were the author of the motion. Do you want to come up here and argue anything, or is the state conferred? Where are you with your motion?
We can start by letting you know in the morning. I haven't read Rule 9.2.
Okay. I would invite you to do that and to short circuit it 9.2C in particular, C Charlie. And we'll go from there. And we can address that in the morning. State still has plenty of witnesses left, and you'll have folks ready as you have all along to fill tomorrow. Okay. The jurors are looking to go a little bit later when they can agree amongst themselves to do that. So just be prepared. When I say a little bit later, we wouldn't push past 6, but it could go to 5:30 some days. Just factor that in terms of witnesses being available so we can use all that time.
I'll just ask the court, as it's been doing consistently, just to inquire at the end of every night, so that when I go back to the office tonight, I can make those adjustments.
Yep. So I don't know what they'll be able to do tomorrow, but ideally we'd go a little further past 5 than today or yesterday, where we stopped before 5, not because you all ran out of witnesses. We just reached the break point at 4:50 something, and it didn't make sense for you to have a witness introduce himself. We have left hanging the motions to quash the media pieces, and then you all, the two sides, were going to confer about what segments of Mr. McIver and team's interview with Zimbrick and Smith were going to be usable. We don't need to sort that out right now, but I flag it for you because what won't work well is it's 2 in the afternoon and you realize, oop, we want to call Smith and we want to get the video in through him.
I got it. It's not gonna happen. Honestly, I just haven't had an opportunity really to get us going the first couple of days.
Sure.
I don't expect Detective Smith and Detective Zimbrick to testify until at the earliest mid next week.
Okay.
Or perhaps even the latter part of the week.
So you've got all weekend to work with
Correct.
that. Okay. And the media situation is the same?
Haven't had a chance, yeah, same thing.
Same thing.
Haven't had a chance to really look at it.
Okay.
That's about it.
All right. My takeaway from the media piece was that the attorneys for the media were having a little difficulty saying, well, the privilege applies, or at least judges should be mindful of the policy behind the privilege, because I couldn't explain for them what exactly you guys wanted. So we're going to need to connect that up.
Yeah, I tried to, I don't know if you saw me run out of the courtroom to catch Ms. Count, so that
Yeah.
we could sit down and talk, and I could tell her very specifically what it is I was looking for and the reason why.
Yeah.
And so I hope it kind of took deep roots.
Okay.
And so I have not had a chance to speak to her since that time.
Okay. You've been busy. Anything else from the state?
No, sir.
Ms. Yelland-Raju, great job with your first witness.
Thank you.
Created a little bit of a stir, but we'll work through that. Maybe you shouldn't have a witness for a little while. We'll see.
These are my first witnesses tonight also.
Well, this is her very, very first.
Ever.
In the trial.
This is my first witness.
Okay. Great job, Mr. Sandy. You two did a wonderful job asking the same question in many different ways. Anything from the defense before we break? Okay, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you then. Thank you.